It's been 2 years since I let a man inside this house. Those words stopped Ethan Cole cold in his tracks that rain-soaked afternoon. His neighbor Marissa, the woman who'd barely spoken 10 words to him in 18 months, stood trembling on her porch, eyes filled with something between desperation and fear. What happened next would shatter the careful walls they'd both built around their broken hearts. But before I tell you how a single storm changed everything, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The sky over Maple Ridge Drive had that peculiar quality of light that comes after violence, when nature catches its breath and the world holds still, as if apologizing for what it's done. Ethan Cole stood in his front yard, work boots sinking into mud that hadn't been there 3 hours earlier, surveying the damage with the methodical eye of a man who'd learned to expect disaster and plan around it. A massive oak limb had come down across his fence, splintering 3 posts and leaving a tangle of wood and wire that would take the better part of the afternoon to clear. Shingles from someone's roof, not his, thank God, littered the street like playing cards thrown by an angry child. Mrs. Patterson's recycling bin had traveled 4 houses down and lay crumpled against a mailbox like a drunk who'd given up on making it home. Ethan grabbed his work gloves from the garage and started on the branches first. Keep moving. That was the rule. When you stop moving, you start thinking. And when you start thinking, the quiet gets too loud. He'd been following that rule for 3 years now. 3 years since Sarah's car had hydroplaned on a rain-slicked highway, since the hospital chaplain had appeared in the waiting room with that particular expression that erases hope, since he'd had to explain to a 6-year-old girl why mommy wasn't coming home. 3 years of learning to be both parents, of mastering ponytails and parent-teacher conferences, of filling a house with enough activity to drown out the echoes. Now Lily was 9, smart as hell, funny, resilient in the way kids are when they have no choice. She was inside now, supposedly doing homework, but probably reading under the covers with a flashlight, a habit she'd inherited from her mother, along with Sarah's green eyes and stubborn chin. Ethan dragged another branch to the growing pile at the curb, muscles burning in a way that felt almost good. Physical work was honest. You could see what needed doing, do it, and move on. Unlike grief, which had no clear beginning or end, no instruction manual, no moment when you could stand back and say, "There. Fixed." He was reaching for the chainsaw when movement across the street caught his eye. The Hale house. That's what everyone in the neighborhood called it. Even though old Mr. Hale had been dead for 2 years, and only his daughter lived there now. The house that never changed its curtains, never put out holiday decorations, never seemed to breathe. Ethan had lived across from it for 18 months and could count on one hand the number of times he'd seen his neighbor, Marissa Hale. 32, according to the neighborhood gossip network that somehow knew everyone's business. Freelance illustrator, worked from home, moved back after her father died to settle the estate and just never left. Or couldn't leave. Ethan wasn't sure which. He'd seen her maybe a dozen times total, collecting mail, carrying groceries from car to house in quick, efficient trips. Once, through her front window late at night, backlit and moving between rooms like a ghost in her own home, they'd exchanged the obligatory waves, the neighborly nods, but nothing more. She had that quality some people develop after loss, a kind of invisible barrier that said, "I'm here, but don't look too closely." Ethan understood that. He'd built similar walls himself. But now she was standing on her porch, and something was different. She wasn't just retrieving mail or making a dash to her car. She was standing there hugging herself despite the humidity, looking directly at him, and she looked scared wasn't quite right. Vulnerable, like someone who'd made a decision that terrified her. Their eyes met across the 30 feet of lawn and asphalt that separated their lives. She opened her mouth, closed it, wrapped her arms tighter around herself. The late afternoon sun caught her hair, dark, pulled back in a messy knot, and for a moment she looked very young and very lost. Then she called out, voice barely carrying over the distance, "Ethan?" He straightened, chainsaw forgotten. In 18 months she'd never used his name, never called to him. The sound of it in her voice felt strange, intimate in a way that made his pulse jump. "Yeah?" he called back. She took a breath. He could see her shoulders rise and fall even from across the street. "It's been 2 years," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the words. 2 years since I let a man inside this house." The words hit him like cold water. His brain stuttered, trying to process, and for one wild moment he thought, but her eyes widened, seeing his expression, and she quickly shook her head. "No, She pressed a hand to her forehead. "God, that came out wrong. I need help. With repairs. The storm, things are broken, and I don't know how to fix them, and She trailed off, looking miserable. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by something gentler, more complicated. He set down the chainsaw and walked to the edge of his driveway. "What needs fixing?" he asked, keeping his voice steady, normal. She gestured vaguely toward her house. "The kitchen faucet's been leaking for months. The garage door won't close right. There's a window upstairs that won't stay open. I keep meaning to call someone, but She stopped, seeming to realize she was rambling. "I'm sorry, you're busy. Never mind." She started to turn away, and Ethan found himself speaking before he'd consciously decided to. "I've got tools," he said. "Give me 5 minutes to tell Lily where I'm going." Marissa stopped, turned back slowly. "You don't have to—" "I know." He was already heading toward his front door. 5 minutes. Inside, Lily was indeed reading under the covers, flashlight casting shadows on her bedroom walls. She looked up guiltily when he opened the door. "I'm going across the street to help Ms. Hale with some repairs," Ethan said, ignoring the book. "I'll be back in an hour or so. Stay inside, okay?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Ms. Hale? The invisible lady?" "She's not invisible. She's just private." "Noah says she's a witch." "Noah says a lot of things. Most of them are wrong." Ethan grabbed his toolbox from the hall closet. "Stay inside. Don't answer the door. Call my cell if you need anything." "Can I come?" "Not this time." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what I'm walking into," Ethan thought. "Because your invisible neighbor just asked a near stranger into her house after 2 years of isolation, and that means something is either very wrong or very fragile. And I don't want you caught in the middle of whatever this is." "Because I said so," he replied, falling back on the universal parent cop-out. "I'll be back soon." He was out the door before she could argue further, toolbox in hand, crossing the street with the strange feeling that he was crossing something larger than asphalt and grass. A boundary. A threshold. Marissa was still on the porch, looking like she might bolt back inside at any moment. Up close, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her elbows. This cost her something, he realized, asking for help, opening the door. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Really, I know this is weird." "It's not weird," Ethan lied, "because what else do you say?" "Where do you want to start?" She led him inside, and Ethan stepped into a world he hadn't known existed across the street from his ordinary life. The house smelled like coffee and old paper, with an underlying hint of paint thinner or turpentine. The living room was dim, curtains drawn tight, but what he could see made him stop and stare. Every wall was covered in sketches, hundreds of them. Detailed pencil drawings of faces, hands, landscapes, buildings. Some were pinned directly to the walls, others in frames, still others scattered across surfaces like fallen leaves. "I'm an illustrator," Marissa said, following his gaze. Her voice had gone flat, defensive. "For books mostly. Children's books." These are incredible," Ethan said, and meant it. He moved closer to one, a drawing of an old man's weathered hands, so detailed you could see every line, every callus. "You did all of these?" "Most of them." She shifted her weight, uncomfortable with the attention. "The kitchen's this way." She led him through a dining room that had been converted into a studio, drafting table, light box, jars of pencils and brushes organized with obsessive precision, into a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Yellow linoleum, wood grain cabinets, a faucet that was indeed dripping into a sink basin stained with rust from months or years of constant moisture. Ethan knelt and opened the cabinet under the sink, pulling out cleaning supplies and old dish towels to access the pipes. The space smelled of mildew and neglect. "My dad used to fix everything," Marissa said from behind him. She'd leaned against the counter, arms wrapped around herself again in that protective posture. "He could repair anything, cars, plumbing, electrical. After he died, I just stopped trying. stopped maintaining things, let it all fall apart. Her voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear her. Ethan pulled out his flashlight and examined the faucet connection. The washer was worn completely through, and the valve seat looked corroded. "How long ago did he pass?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone casual, conversational. Give her something normal to hold on to. 2 years, heart attack. He was working in the garage one Saturday morning and just didn't come in for lunch. She paused. I found him 3 hours later. Christ. Ethan's hand stilled on the pipe wrench. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. The words came out sharper than she probably intended, and she immediately softened her voice. I mean, thank you. Sorry, I don't talk to people much anymore. I noticed, Ethan said, then worried that sounded judgmental. I mean, it's okay. I get it. After my wife died, I didn't talk to anyone for months except Lily, and even then, only when I had to. The words came out before he could stop them. He never talked about Sarah, not to neighbors, not to coworkers, barely even to Lily. But something about this dim kitchen, about Marissa's careful vulnerability, made the truth slip out. I didn't know, Marissa said softly. About your wife, Don't, Ethan interrupted gently. Everyone's sorry, right? A pause, then, surprisingly, a small laugh. Right. He got back to work, removing the old washer and examining the valve. I need to run to the hardware store. This whole assembly needs replacing. Should take about 20 minutes total. I can pay you. Don't insult me. He started packing up his tools. I'll be back in 15. He was halfway to the door when she spoke again. Ethan? He turned. She was still leaning against the counter, but something in her posture had changed, softened. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. It was a fair question. Ethan considered it, considered her, considered the 18 months of careful distance they'd maintained. Because you asked, he said finally. And because I know what it's like to need help and be too afraid to ask for it. Something flickered in her eyes, recognition maybe, or relief. 15 minutes, he repeated, and left before the moment could become too heavy. The hardware store was a blur of fluorescent lights and helpful employees who talked too much. Ethan grabbed what he needed and was back in 12 minutes, finding Marissa exactly where he'd left her, as if she hadn't moved at all. The repair took 20 minutes. He replaced the washer, the valve seat, and the entire faucet cartridge, working in the kind of focused silence that came from years of home ownership and single parenting. When you're the only adult in the house, you learn to fix things, or you learn to live with them broken. Ethan had chosen the former. Marissa watched him work, not speaking, just present. It should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. The silence felt comfortable, like they'd both forgotten how to make small talk and were grateful not to try. When he finally turned the water back on, the faucet ran smooth and clean. No drips, no leaks, just clear water flowing exactly as it should. In the sudden quiet after he shut it off, the absence of that constant drip felt enormous, like a headache you'd stop noticing until it was gone. It's been dripping for 8 months, Marissa said, staring at the faucet. 8 months of that sound, every hour of every day. I stopped hearing it after a while. She looked at Ethan, and her eyes were bright with something like tears. Thank you. It was just a washer, he said, uncomfortable with the weight of her gratitude. It wasn't just a washer. She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. Sorry, I'm being ridiculous. You're not. He started packing up his tools. What else needs fixing? She blinked. What? You said there was a garage door and a window. Oh, You don't have to do all that today. I'm already here. Might as well. The garage door turned out to be a simple fix. The safety sensor had been knocked askew, probably during the storm. Ethan realigned it, tested the door 3 times, and had it working in under 10 minutes. The window was trickier. It was in what had clearly been her father's bedroom, still full of his things, untouched, like a museum exhibit. Marissa stood in the doorway but wouldn't enter the room. Ethan didn't comment on it. He just examined the window mechanism, found the balance spring had snapped, and pulled out his phone to order a replacement part online. It'll be here in 2 days, he said. I can come back and install it if you want. Marissa was staring at the room like it might attack her. "Okay," she said distantly. Then, seeming to shake herself, "Yes, thank you. I should pay you. For your time, for the parts." "I don't want your money, Marissa." It was the first time he'd used her name. She seemed to notice, her eyes focusing on him with sudden clarity. "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them were ready to examine. Ethan thought about his empty house across the street, about 3 years of careful solitude, about walls built brick by brick around a heart that had learned it was safer not to feel. "Nothing," he said finally. "I just want to help." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Finally, she nodded. "Coffee?" she offered. "I make terrible coffee, but I have some." Ethan smiled. "Sure." They went back downstairs and Marissa busied herself with an ancient coffee maker while Ethan stood awkwardly in the kitchen, suddenly aware that he'd spent the last hour in a stranger's house and had no idea what happened next. "How old is Lily?" Marissa asked, measuring grounds with intense concentration. 9, 4th grade. "What's she like?" No one ever asked that. They asked how he was managing, whether she was doing okay, whether he'd considered therapy or support groups. But no one asked what she was like, as if she were a whole person rather than a problem to be solved. "Smart," Ethan said, surprised by the question. "Scary smart. Reads everything. Makes up stories. Draws, actually. Not as good as you, but pretty good. She's stubborn as hell. Won't let anyone help her with anything because she's convinced she can figure it out herself." He paused, feeling the familiar ache. "She's a lot like her mother." Marissa poured water into the machine. "Do you talk about her, Sarah?" "Not really." Ethan leaned against the counter. "Lily asks sometimes. I answer, but I don't bring her up. Doesn't seem fair to either of them, you know? Sarah's gone and Lily's here, and dwelling on it doesn't change anything." "Does that work?" Marissa's voice was genuinely curious, not challenging. "The not dwelling?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I'm still waiting to find out." The coffee maker began its laborious process, filling the kitchen with the smell of slightly burned beans. Marissa got down 2 mugs, mismatched, one with a faded comic strip, one advertising a bank that probably didn't exist anymore. "I packed up his clothes," she said suddenly. "Last month. 2 years of looking at his flannel shirts every time I opened the closet, and I finally packed them up." She gripped the counter edge. "I still haven't donated them. They're in boxes in the garage. I keep thinking I'll do it next week, but next week comes and I just can't." "Maybe you're not supposed to yet," Ethan said. She looked at him. "When does it stop hurting?" It was the question everyone wanted to ask and no one ever did. The question with no good answer. "I don't think it does," Ethan said carefully. "I think you just get better at carrying it." The coffee finished brewing with a final gurgle. Marissa poured 2 cups and handed him one. Their fingers brushed in the exchange. Brief, accidental, electric. Both of them pretended not to notice. The coffee was, as promised, terrible. Weak and bitter at the same time, an impressive feat. They drank it anyway. "I should get back," Ethan said after a few minutes of companionable silence. "Lily's probably building something dangerous or teaching herself calculus or both." Marissa almost smiled. "Thank you. For today. For all of it. I'll come back Thursday. For the window." She hesitated, and he could see the fear flash across her face, the terror of letting someone in, of breaking the careful isolation she'd built. But then she nodded. Thursday. Ethan crossed back to his house as the sun started to set, toolbox in hand, mind churning. Lily ambushed him the moment he walked in the door. "What's she like? Is her house creepy? Did you see any cats? Noah says witches always have cats." "Noah needs to read fewer books," Ethan said, setting down the toolbox. "And her house is fine. Normal. She needed help with some repairs, so I helped her." "Are you going back?" "Thursday, to fix a window." Lily's eyes went wide with the gleeful conspiracy of a 9-year-old who thinks she's discovered a secret. "You like her." "I barely know her," Ethan protested, but he could feel heat rising in his face. "You're blushing." "I'm sunburned. Go set the table." But as he stood in his kitchen making dinner, Chicken and rice, nothing fancy, the same thing he made every Tuesday. Ethan found his eyes drifting to the window that faced the Hale house. The curtains were still drawn. The porch light was off. It looked exactly as it always had, closed, dark, impenetrable. But he'd been inside now. He'd seen the sketches on every wall, the studio full of careful order, the bedroom she couldn't enter. He'd heard about an 8-month drip she'd stopped noticing, about boxes of flannel shirts gathering dust in a garage. He'd seen Marissa Hale, and somehow that changed everything. Thursday came faster than Ethan expected. He'd ordered the window part with overnight shipping, telling himself it was just efficiency, not eagerness. When it arrived Wednesday afternoon, he spent 20 minutes that evening watching videos on YouTube about balanced spring installation, even though he'd done it a dozen times before. Lily noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "You're nervous," she observed over breakfast Thursday morning, watching him check his toolbox for the third time. "I'm not nervous. You reorganized your tools. You only do that when you're nervous. When did you become a detective?" "I'm just observant." She took a bite of cereal. "Can I come this time?" Ethan paused. He'd been about to say no automatically, but something made him reconsider. Maybe it would be good for Marissa to see that the world wasn't just grief and solitude. Maybe it would be good for Lily to meet someone who understood loss. Or maybe he was rationalizing because part of him wanted the safety of his daughter's presence, the barrier against whatever this thing was that he felt pulling him across the street. "If Ms. Hale says it's okay," he said finally. Lily pumped her fist in victory. "Chet." Marissa answered the door 30 seconds after Ethan knocked, as if she'd been waiting nearby. She looked different than she had on Tuesday. Hair down instead of pulled back, wearing a clean shirt instead of the paint-stained one. She'd put in effort, Ethan realized, for him. The thought made his chest tight. Then she saw Lily and froze. "I hope it's okay," Ethan said quickly. "She wanted to come. We can—" "It's fine," Marissa interrupted, but her voice had gone thin. She looked at Lily the way someone might look at a beautiful but unpredictable animal. "Hi." "Hi," Lily said, undaunted. "Your house is really cool. Can I see your drawings?" Just like that. No fear, no hesitation. The way kids approach the world before life teaches them to be careful. Marissa blinked. Sure. Yeah." She led them inside, and Ethan watched Lily's eyes go wide as she took in the sketches covering every surface. His daughter moved from drawing to drawing with the focused intensity she usually reserved for books, studying each one. "These are amazing," Lily breathed. "Did you really do all of them?" "Most of them." Marissa had relaxed slightly, watching Lily's genuine fascination. "Some are studies. Practice." "Can you teach me?" The question seemed to startle Marissa. "To draw?" "Yeah, I draw okay, but not like this. These look real." Marissa glanced at Ethan, something like panic in her eyes. He gave her a small shrug. "Your call." "Maybe sometime," Marissa said carefully, "if your dad says it's okay." "He'll say yes," Lily announced confidently. "He always says yes when I want to learn things." "That's not—" Ethan started, but Lily had already moved on, drawn to the studio visible through the dining room doorway. "Can I see your workspace? I promise I won't touch anything." Marissa looked at Ethan again. He could see the war happening behind her eyes, the instinct to protect her space against the strange, fragile hope of connection. Finally, she nodded. "Just don't touch the drafting table. I have a project due next week." Lily disappeared into the studio, and Ethan could hear her excited exclamations about the light box and the organized pencils. Marissa watched her go with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I should have warned you we were bringing Hurricane Lily." "No, she's sweet." Marissa's voice was soft. "How old was she when your wife died?" 6. "Does she remember her?" "Some days better than others." Ethan set down his toolbox. "She's got photos, videos. I make sure she knows Sarah loved her, but you can't hold on to someone through pictures. The real memories fade." They stood in silence for a moment, both looking toward the studio where Lily was enthusiastically narrating her exploration to herself. "I don't know how to talk to kids," Marissa admitted. Just talk to her like a person. She'll do the rest. As if to prove his point, Lily reappeared, holding a sketchbook she'd clearly been given permission to look through. Ms. Hale, is this from the Whispering Woods series? I love those books. Marissa's face transformed. You've read them? All 6. The illustrations are my favorite part, especially the one where Luna finds the crystal cave. I stared at that picture for like an hour. I spent 3 weeks on that drawing, Marissa said, and there was something like joy in her voice. Getting the light refraction right through all those crystals. It's perfect. It looks exactly how I imagined it when I read the description. They fell into conversation. Easy, animated conversation about books and art and favorite characters. Ethan stood back and watched, something warm unfurling in his chest. This was what Marissa looked like without walls. Alive. Present. Eventually, he cleared his throat. I should probably fix that window before it gets dark. Oh, right. Marissa looked almost disappointed to end the conversation. Lily, do you want to help me water the garden while your dad works? I've been neglecting it. Lily looked to Ethan for permission. He nodded. Cool. I love gardening. We have a vegetable garden at home, but it's mostly weeds right now because Dad's been busy. Then you can tell me what I'm doing wrong with mine, Marissa said, and led her toward the back door. Ethan climbed the stairs to the second floor, but instead of going straight to the father's bedroom, he found himself pausing in the hallway, listening to the sound of voices and laughter floating up from the garden. Marissa's laugh. He'd never heard it before. It was rusty, unpracticed, but genuine. The window repair took 40 minutes. Ethan worked slowly, carefully, taking his time, not because it was difficult, but because he wasn't ready to leave yet. Through the window, he could see the backyard, overgrown but not hopeless, full of plants that had survived despite neglect. Lily and Marissa were kneeling in a flower bed, pulling weeds. Lily was talking a mile a minute, gesturing wildly as she told some story. Marissa was mostly listening, but occasionally she'd say something that made Lily laugh, that bright, unself-conscious laugh that made Ethan's heart ache with how much she sounded like Sarah. He finished the window, tested it 3 times to make sure it would hold, then packed up his tools and headed downstairs. They came in from the garden, dirt-smudged and happy. Lily chattering about companion planting and how they should plant tomatoes and basil together because they helped each other grow. She knows everything, Marissa told Ethan, but she was smiling. I've been gardening wrong for 2 years. I just read a lot, Lily said modestly. Then to her father, can we plant stuff together? Me and Ms. Hale? She said she'd show me how to propagate succulents. Ethan looked at Marissa, who was studiously examining a dirt stain on her shirt, not meeting his eyes. If Ms. Hale wants to, he said carefully. I do, Marissa said quietly. If that's okay. Saturday? Lily pressed. Morning, before it gets too hot? Lily, Ethan started. Saturday's fine, Marissa interrupted. 10 o'clock? Lily beamed. Perfect. They left a few minutes later, Lily skipping ahead while Ethan carried his toolbox. At his front door, he turned back to see Marissa still standing on her porch, watching them. She raised a hand in a small wave. He waved back. I like her, Lily announced once they were inside. She's sad, but she's nice. Can we have her over for dinner sometime? Maybe, Ethan said, mind still on that small wave, on the way Marissa had looked at his daughter with something like hunger. We'll see. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan stood at his bedroom window looking at the house across the street. For the first time in 18 months, there was a light on in one of the rooms. Not bright, just a soft glow. Someone awake, someone present. He didn't know what was happening, didn't know if it was good or dangerous or somewhere in between. All he knew was that the careful isolation he'd built, the safe routine he'd maintained, was starting to crack, and he wasn't sure he wanted to stop it. Saturday morning arrived bright and warm. Lily was up at 7, checking the clock every 5 minutes, asking if it was time to go yet. Ethan made breakfast and tried to pretend this was normal, this anticipation, this feeling like something was beginning. At exactly 10 o'clock, they crossed the street. Marissa was already outside, kneeling by a flower bed with gloves and tools spread around her. She'd pulled her hair back and was wearing clothes that had clearly seen better days, comfortable in a way that suggested she'd stopped performing. "Right on time," she said, smiling at Lily. "Ready to get dirty?" Lily dropped to her knees beside her without hesitation. "What are we planting first?" Ethan stood awkwardly to the side, not sure what his role was supposed to be. Marissa glanced up at him. "There's coffee inside if you want it. Still terrible, but it's hot. I can help." "We've got it," Lily interrupted. "This is girl time. Right, Ms. Hale?" "Right," Marissa agreed, and there was something conspiratorial in the way she said it that made Ethan feel simultaneously excluded and grateful. He went inside, poured himself a cup of indeed terrible coffee, and settled at the kitchen table where he could see the garden through the window. He pulled out his phone, intending to check email or read news, but instead found himself just watching. Marissa was teaching Lily how to separate root balls, her hands patient and sure. Lily was asking 1,000 questions, and Marissa was answering each one with the kind of attention that suggested she was taking them seriously. When Lily got dirt on her face, Marissa laughed and wiped it off with her sleeve, unself-conscious and gentle. It struck Ethan suddenly that this was the first time since Sarah died that another woman had touched his daughter with that kind of casual affection. The realization hit harder than it should have. They worked for over an hour, planting lavender and some kind of ground cover Ethan didn't recognize. When they finally came inside, both were streaked with dirt and grinning. "We need to plant the same stuff at our house," Lily announced. "Ms. Hale says lavender keeps mosquitoes away." "Does she?" Ethan said, amused. "She also says we should build a rain garden to help with drainage. Our yard gets all swampy when it rains hard." A rain garden requires planning," Ethan started. "I have books," Marissa offered. "I could loan them to you. To Lily, I mean." "Please, Dad?" He was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and all three of them knew it. "Fine, but we're not building anything until we have an actual plan." Lily hugged Marissa impulsively, getting dirt all over her clean shirt. Marissa froze for a half second, then slowly brought her arms up to return the hug, her expression somewhere between terrified and touched. "Thank you for teaching me," Lily said. "Can I come back next week?" "Lily, Ethan warned. "If it's okay with your dad," Marissa said carefully, "you can come back whenever you want." The word seemed to surprise even her. She met Ethan's eyes over Lily's head, and he saw the fear there again, the terror of extending herself, of offering something she might have to take back. He nodded slowly. "It's okay. I understand." Set. It became a routine after that, though none of them ever explicitly planned it. Lily would find excuses to cross the street, to return a book, to ask about a plant, to show Marissa a drawing she'd made. Sometimes Ethan would come with her. Sometimes he'd watch from his window as Marissa welcomed his daughter into her carefully guarded space. The two of them would spend hours in the garden, or in Marissa's studio where Lily was learning to sketch properly. Marissa taught her about perspective, about light and shadow, about seeing what was actually there instead of what you thought you saw. Ethan found himself joining them more often than not. A loose board on Marissa's porch, a gutter that needed clearing, a cabinet door that wouldn't close right. Small repairs that gave him a reason to be there, to exist in her orbit. They developed an unspoken language, the three of them. Marissa would make coffee. Ethan would fix something. Lily would chatter about school or books or some new plant she'd discovered. They'd sit on the porch in the evening sometimes, watching fireflies emerge as the light faded, not needing to fill the silence. It was Marissa who started bringing coffee to Ethan while he worked, appearing beside him with a mug and a quiet, "Thought you might need this." It was Ethan who started noticing when her porch light stayed on too late, when she worked through the night on a deadline and forgot to eat. He'd bring over leftovers from dinner, leaving them on her porch with a note. Made too much. Seemed wasteful to throw it out. It was careful, cautious. Two people who'd learned to protect themselves, learning to lower their guards by inches. And then came the night of the second storm. The weather forecast had been calling for severe thunderstorms all week, but Ethan had stopped believing forecasts after they'd missed the last big one. So when the storm rolled in around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, he was unprepared. The first crack of thunder shook the house. Ethan was up immediately, checking on Lily, still asleep somehow, her child's ability to sleep through anything never failing to amaze him. He stood at his bedroom window, watching lightning strobe across the sky, illuminating the neighborhood in harsh white flashes. Across the street, Marissa's house was dark, except for a light in an upstairs window. Her bedroom, he'd figured out. The one room she seemed to actually live in. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he'd added to his contacts 2 weeks earlier. Marissa. Water in the basement. I don't know what to do. Ethan didn't think, didn't hesitate. He pulled on jeans and boots, grabbed a flashlight, and ran through the rain that was already coming down in sheets. By the time he reached her porch, he was soaked through. Marissa opened the door before he could knock, hair wild, eyes wide with something close to panic. I heard it first, she said, words tumbling out. Water running where it shouldn't be. I went down and there's so much water, Ethan. It's coming in through the window well, and I don't know how to stop it. And my dad's tools are down there, his workbench, everything. Show me, he said calmly, and followed her down the basement stairs. The water was already 3 inches deep and rising. It was gushing through a cracked window well, pouring in like a faucet someone had left running. Boxes were floating, tools were scattered, years of accumulated possessions slowly drowning. We need to seal the window first, Ethan said, already moving. Do you have plastic sheeting? Duct tape? In the garage, I think. Get it. I'll start moving things to higher ground. They worked together in focused silence, the kind that comes from shared emergency. Marissa came back with supplies, and they sealed the window from the inside, working against the pressure of water pushing through. It took 15 minutes and every bit of duct tape she had, but finally the flow slowed to a trickle. We need to get this water toward the drain, Ethan said, already using a push broom to guide the water across the sloped floor. Marissa grabbed another broom and worked beside him. Rain hammered the house above them. Thunder rolled like artillery. Water squelched under their feet. And then Marissa's foot slipped on the wet concrete. She went down hard, arms windmilling. Ethan dropped his broom and caught her before she could hit the floor, one arm around her waist, steadying her against his chest. For a moment, they just stood there, breathing hard, dripping wet, pressed together in the dim basement light. Then Marissa started to shake, not from cold, not from the near fall. This was something deeper breaking open. 2 years of careful control shattering all at once. I can't do this anymore, she said, and her voice was raw, broken. I can't keep doing everything alone. I'm so tired, Ethan. I'm so tired of pretending I'm fine, of pretending I have it together, of pretending I don't need... She stopped, pressing her face against his shoulder. Her hands gripped his wet shirt like she was drowning, and he was solid ground. Ethan held her, not tightly. She could pull away if she wanted, just steadily, offering anchor, not cage. You don't have to pretend with me, he said quietly. You never did. Above them, the storm raged. Water still seeped through their makeshift seal. The basement was a disaster that would take days to clean up properly. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Marissa didn't pull away, didn't apologize, didn't try to rebuild the walls that had just crumbled. She just stood there in his arms, letting herself be held, letting herself be not fine. And Ethan realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that he'd been waiting for this. Not the storm, not the crisis, but this moment of raw honesty. This permission to stop performing strength and just be two people who understood what it meant to be broken. I'm scared, Marissa whispered against his shirt. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of caring about someone again, and then her hands tightened. Everyone I love leaves, dies, disappears. I can't... I'm not going anywhere, Ethan said. The words came out before he'd thought them through, but they were true. I'm right here. She lifted her head then, looking at him with eyes that held too much fear and too much hope in equal measure. They were still standing in 3 inches of water, still soaked to the bone, still surrounded by the wreckage of a flooded basement. None of it mattered. Ethan didn't know who moved first. Maybe both of them. Maybe neither. But suddenly the distance between them had closed, and he was kissing her, or she was kissing him, and it felt like coming up for air after being underwater too long. It wasn't desperate or passionate. It was gentle, careful, like they were both learning to trust something they'd forgotten how to believe in. When they pulled apart, Marissa's cheeks were wet, though whether from rain or tears, Ethan couldn't tell. I don't know how to do this, she said. Neither do I. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. So we figure it out together. She leaned her forehead against his, breathing hard. Slowly? As slow as you need. They stood there for another long moment, just breathing together, before the practical reality of a flooded basement reasserted itself. We should finish cleaning up, Marissa said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Ethan agreed, also not moving. Finally, reluctantly, they separated and got back to work. But something had fundamentally changed. They worked side by side now, not as neighbor helping neighbor, but as something else. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. By the time they got the water mostly cleared, it would need proper drainage and fans, but the immediate crisis was past. It was after 2 a.m. The storm had moved on, leaving only steady rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. They came upstairs soaked, exhausted, and covered in basement grime. Marissa looked at Ethan and started laughing, slightly hysterical but genuine. You look like you lost a fight with a swamp. You should see yourself. She caught sight of her reflection in a darkened window and laughed harder. God, we're a mess. Yeah, Ethan smiled. We really are. The laughter faded into comfortable quiet. They stood in her kitchen, dripping on the linoleum, both aware that something had shifted irrevocably between them. I should go, Ethan said, though he didn't want to. Check on Lily. She probably slept through the whole thing, but of course. Marissa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly self-conscious. Thank you for coming over, for everything. Marissa, he stepped closer, lifting her chin gently so she'd meet his eyes. I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. She searched his face, looking for doubt or deception or whatever fears she'd been carrying. Finally, she nodded. Okay. He kissed her forehead, chaste, gentle, and then forced himself to leave before he could change his mind. The rain was lighter now, just a drizzle. Ethan walked across the street slowly, mind spinning, heart doing things it hadn't done in 3 years. When he reached his porch, he turned back. Marissa was still standing in her doorway, watching him. When their eyes met, she smiled, small, uncertain, but real. Ethan raised a hand. She waved back. Then they both went inside, back to their separate houses, their separate lives. But not separate anymore. Not really. Something had begun. The morning after the storm, Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the disorienting realization that he'd slept past his alarm. He grabbed his phone. 8:47 a.m. Lily would be up already, probably wondering where breakfast was. He rolled out of bed, muscles aching from the night's work, and caught sight of himself in the mirror. There was a bruise forming on his shoulder where he'd caught Marissa's fall, and his hands were scraped raw from moving waterlogged boxes. Physical evidence of something he still wasn't sure how to process. The kiss, the way she'd felt in his arms, the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of walls coming down. Downstairs, Lily was already at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, reading a book about native plants. She looked up when he entered, eyes sharp with the kind of perception kids have when adults are trying to hide something. You got home late, she said. It wasn't quite an accusation, but close. Ms. Hale's basement flooded. I helped her clean it up. Is she okay? The question was simple, but the concern in Lily's voice made Ethan's chest tight. His daughter had lost one important woman in her life already. The thought of her getting attached to another, of what it might mean if things went wrong. She's fine, he said, pushing the fear aside. Just needed some help, that's all. Lily studied him for a long moment, then went back to her book. Noah's mom says Ms. Hale is probably going to move away soon. She says nobody stays in their dead parents' house forever. Noah's mom should mind her own business. That's what I said. Lily turned a page. Is she moving away? I don't know, Lil. I don't think so. Good. I'd miss her. The simple honesty of it hit Ethan harder than it should have. He poured himself coffee, real coffee, not Marissa's terrible attempt, and stood at the window that faced her house. The curtains were still drawn, no movement visible. She was probably exhausted, sleeping off the night's crisis, or lying awake, second-guessing everything, rebuilding the walls they'd both let crumble. His phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. Thank you for last night, for everything. I'm sorry I fell apart on you. Ethan stared at the message, reading the apology between the lines. She was pulling back, retreating to safe ground, to safe. He could practically hear her rationalizing. It was just the stress of the storm, just the vulnerability of the moment. It didn't mean anything. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on nothing to apologize for. How's the basement? The response came quickly. Disaster, but manageable. I'll figure it out. There it was. The return to isolation. I'll figure it out meaning I don't need help, meaning please don't come over. Ethan set down his phone and made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary anyway. Lily, he said, get dressed. We're going to help Ms. Hale with her basement. His daughter looked up, surprised but pleased. Really? Really. Bring your rain boots. It's going to be messy. 20 minutes later, they crossed the street carrying a shop vac, fans, and cleaning supplies. Ethan knocked on Marissa's door and waited, half expecting her not to answer. But after a long moment, she opened it. She looked exhausted. Hair tied back messily, wearing the same clothes from last night, dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept at all. When she saw them, something flickered across her face, relief and panic in equal measure. You don't have to, she started. We know, Lily interrupted cheerfully. We want to help. Right, Dad? Ethan met Marissa's eyes over his daughter's head. I'm not going anywhere. Remember? Marissa's throat worked. She stepped aside. Okay, thank you. The basement was worse in daylight. Water still pooled in corners. Boxes had disintegrated, spilling their contents across the wet floor. Tools were rusting. Photo albums had bloated with moisture, images bleeding together into abstract watercolors of lost memories. Oh no, Lily breathed, kneeling beside a ruined album. Ms. Hale, are these your dad's pictures? Marissa stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the wreckage of 2 years of accumulated grief, with an expression that made Ethan want to gather her up and carry her away from all of it. Yeah, she said quietly. They are. Can we save them? Lily looked up, eyes wide with the kind of earnest hope that made adults want to promise impossible things. Some of them, maybe. Ethan set down the shop vac. If we dry them out carefully, it'll take time. I've got time, Lily announced. I don't have homework today because it's Saturday, and we're already here, so we might as well help. The logic was irrefutable, delivered with such matter-of-fact kindness that Marissa actually smiled. They worked for hours. Ethan ran the shop vac while Lily and Marissa carefully separated photos, laying them out on towels in rooms upstairs where sunlight could dry them without causing more damage. It was slow, painstaking work. Many photos were beyond saving, their images dissolved into murky stains. But some survived, faded, warped, but recognizable. Marissa held up a photo of a man in his 50s, arms around a teenage girl with dark hair and a tentative smile. My high school graduation, she said softly. He was so proud. I'd just gotten accepted to art school. You look happy, Lily observed. I was. Marissa set the photo down carefully. I didn't know it then, but that was probably the last time everything was simple. They worked in comfortable silence after that, broken only by Lily's occasional questions about who people were in the photos or where they'd been taken. Marissa answered patiently, and Ethan noticed that with each answer, she seemed to breathe a little easier. Like speaking about her father out loud was lifting weight instead of adding it. Around noon, Ethan ordered pizza. They ate sitting on Marissa's living room floor, surrounded by drying photographs, all of them too tired to bother with plates or napkins. Lily told stories about school, about her friend Emma, who was convinced she could talk to plants, about the science project she wanted to do on mycelium networks. Marissa listened with the kind of attention adults rarely gave kids, asking follow-up questions, genuinely interested. And Lily bloomed under that attention the way she always did when someone treated her like she mattered. Ethan watched them together and felt something dangerous taking root in his chest. Not just attraction, that would be simpler. This was the terrifying realization that they fit. His daughter and this broken, careful woman fit together in a way that felt both natural and heartbreaking. After lunch, they went back to work. The basement was slowly becoming manageable. Still a disaster, but an organized disaster. Around 3 p.m., Lily announced she was going upstairs to reorganize the photos by date because they'll be easier to put in albums that way, which left Ethan and Marissa alone in the basement for the first time since the night before. They worked in silence for a while, both acutely aware of each other in a way that made the air feel thick. Finally, Marissa spoke. "About last night, don't," Ethan interrupted gently. "Don't apologize again. Don't take it back." She stopped working, standing very still with a box in her hands. "I wasn't going to apologize." "No?" "No." She set down the box. "I was going to say thank you for not running away when I lost it, for not making it weird this morning, for showing up today even though I told you I'd figure it out alone." Ethan straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You don't have to do everything alone anymore. You know that, right?" "I don't know how to not do things alone." The admission came out small, vulnerable. "It's been my default for so long. Ask for help, and people leave. Need someone, and they disappear. So you just stop needing." "Is that what you want?" Ethan asked. "To stop needing people?" She met his eyes. "No, but wanting something and knowing how to have it are different things." He crossed the basement to stand in front of her, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the exact curve of her mouth. "Then we learned together, like I said." "Ethan," her voice caught. "What if I'm not ready? What if I mess this up?" "Then we'll deal with it." He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm not asking you to be ready. I'm just asking you not to shut me out." She leaned into his touch, eyes closing. "I'm terrified." "Me too." That made her eyes open. "You are?" "Marissa, I haven't looked at another woman since Sarah died. Haven't wanted to. And then you called to me across the street, and suddenly I can't stop thinking about you. About this. About what it means and where it goes and how badly I could screw it up." He let his hand fall. "So yeah, I'm terrified." She searched his face, looking for something. Then slowly she reached up and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. The gesture was simple, but it felt monumental. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we'll try. Slowly." "Slowly," he agreed. They stood there, hands linked, until Lily's voice floated down from upstairs. "Dad! Ms. Hale! I found pictures from when she was a baby. She was so cute." Marissa laughed, breaking the tension. "She's been going through my entire house, hasn't she?" "Probably," Ethan admitted. "She's very thorough." They went upstairs to find Lily surrounded by photo albums. Not just the waterlogged ones from the basement, but others she'd apparently found on shelves and in closets. She'd organized them chronologically and was now engrossed in what appeared to be Marissa's childhood. "You had braces," Lily observed, "and really bad bangs." "Everyone had bad bangs in the 90s, Marissa said, sitting down beside her. "It was legally required." Ethan watched them flip through albums together, Lily asking questions and Marissa answering with increasing ease. This domestic scene, this casual intimacy of shared history, this was what he'd been missing without knowing it. Not romance necessarily, but connection. The feeling of being part of something larger than survival. His phone rang. He checked the caller ID and sighed. "I need to take this work thing." He stepped onto the porch, leaving them to their photo expedition. The call was indeed work-related. A project deadline had moved up. Could he come in Monday to review materials? He agreed, made notes, hung up. When he turned to go back inside, he found himself looking at his own house across the street. Dark windows, empty rooms, the life he'd built brick by careful brick, designed to be safe and predictable and painfully small. And he realized he didn't want to go back to that. Didn't want the isolation he'd convinced himself was necessary. Didn't want to keep living like the only way to protect his heart was to never use it. Behind him, through Marissa's window, he could hear Lily laughing at something. Could see the two of them bent over an album, heads close together. It was terrifying. It was dangerous. It could all fall apart, but God, it was worth the risk. He went back inside to find them making dinner plans. "I have stuff for pasta," Marissa was saying. "Nothing fancy, but enough for 3 if you want to stay." "Can we, Dad? Please?" Lily looked up with hopeful eyes. Ethan glanced at Marissa, saw the careful vulnerability in her expression. She was extending herself again, offering connection despite the fear. The least he could do was meet her halfway. "Pasta sounds great," he said. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Lily helped by talking non-stop and occasionally stirring things. Marissa cooked with the efficiency of someone who'd fed herself alone for years, but was rediscovering the pleasure of cooking for others. Ethan set the table, opened wine for the adults, and poured juice for Lily, and tried not to think too hard about how natural this felt. They ate at Marissa's dining table, cleared of art supplies for the occasion, and talked about nothing important: favorite movies, worst cooking disasters, the neighborhood cat that seemed to belong to everyone and no one. Easy conversation that felt like laying foundation. After dinner, Lily helped with dishes, then settled on the couch with one of Marissa's sketchbooks, granted permission to look, not touch. Within 10 minutes, she was asleep, curled up like a cat, the book sliding from her loose fingers. Ethan carefully extracted the sketchbook and set it aside. I should get her home. Or, Marissa hesitated, she could sleep on the couch if you want to stay a while. Talk. The offer hung between them, weighted with implication. Staying meant something. Staying meant choosing forward motion over careful retreat. Okay, Ethan said. They moved to the porch, bringing their wine, settling into the quiet of early evening. Lightning bugs were just beginning to emerge, blinking their patient codes in the gathering dark. Somewhere down the street, someone was grilling. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass. This is nice, Marissa said softly. Having people in the house again. I'd forgotten what it felt like. When did you stop? Ethan asked. Having people over? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the fireflies. My dad got sick about 6 months before he died. Heart disease. He didn't tell me until it was advanced. You know how men of his generation were about weakness. By the time I found out, he needed full-time care. So you came home. I was living in Chicago. Had a good career going, illustrating for major publishers, dating a guy who seemed promising. She took a sip of wine. I left all of it to come take care of Dad. Told myself it would be temporary, that I'd go back after. But you didn't. He died. I stayed to settle the estate, and then I just couldn't leave. This house, it was all I had left of him. His tools in the garage, his coffee mugs in the cabinet, his terrible taste in curtains. Her voice went rough. Leaving felt like erasing him. Ethan understood that. After Sarah died, he'd kept her things for over a year. Her clothes in the closet, her shampoo in the shower, her coffee mug in the cabinet, unwashed from the last time she'd used it. Physical proof that she'd existed, that their life together hadn't been a dream. What about the guy in Chicago? He asked. Jake. Marissa smiled without humor. He visited once after Dad died, stayed 3 days. On the second day, he started talking about how I needed to move on, how staying here was unhealthy, how I was using grief as an excuse to avoid life. Sounds like a prince. He wasn't wrong, Marissa admitted. I was avoiding life. I am avoiding life. But you don't get to tell someone in pain how to hurt. So I told him to leave. He did. 2 weeks later, I saw on social media that he was dating someone new. Someone who didn't come with grief and dead fathers and complicated emotions. His loss. She glanced at him. You don't know that. You barely know me. I know enough. Ethan shifted to face her. I know you're talented enough to illustrate books that kids all over the country love. I know you're patient enough to teach a 9-year-old about propagating succulents. I know you're strong enough to live alone in your father's house for 2 years even though it's killing you. And I know you're brave enough to ask for help even though it terrifies you. Her eyes were bright in the porch light. You see me differently than I see myself. Maybe you should trust my view more than your own. She laughed, shaky but genuine. That's a lot of trust to ask from someone you met 3 weeks ago. Had it only been 3 weeks? It felt longer. Or maybe it just felt like the life before. The careful, isolated life had been happening to someone else. Fair point, Ethan conceded. So let's start smaller. Trust me enough to tell me what you're thinking right now. Marissa set down her wine glass. I'm thinking this is the most normal I've felt in 2 years. I'm thinking I want to touch you, but I'm afraid if I do, it'll break whatever spell this is. I'm thinking my therapist would be so proud that I'm talking about my feelings instead of avoiding them. And I'm thinking... She stopped. What? I'm thinking I want to kiss you again, but I want it to be because we both choose it, not because we're caught up in a crisis. Ethan's heart was doing complicated things in his chest. He reached across the small distance between them and took her hand. Then choose it. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. What about Lily? She's asleep on your couch. She's fine. I mean, what does this mean for her? For you and me and whatever this is? She's already attached to me. I see it in how she looks at me, how she lights up when she comes over. If we do this and it doesn't work out, then we deal with it like adults, Ethan interrupted. We talk to her, we stay civil. We don't make her choose or put her in the middle. We protect her however we need to. He squeezed her hand. But Marissa, we can't live our lives around worst-case scenarios. We'd never do anything. I know. She took a shaky breath. I can't hurt another person I care about. I can't be the reason someone else's life falls apart. Hey! Ethan shifted closer, close enough to see the fear in her eyes, the hope fighting against it. You are not responsible for your father's death. You are not responsible for how Jake handled his own emotions. You are not broken or toxic or cursed. You're just someone who's been through hell and came out the other side, that's all. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated and probably a terrible idea. He smiled. But I want to try anyway. She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her working through it, weighing risk against desire, fear against hope. Finally, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was different from the basement kiss. That had been born of crisis and vulnerability. This was a choice, a conscious decision to move toward instead of away. When they pulled apart, Marissa was smiling. Okay, let's try this. Whatever this is, slowly, carefully, and probably with more communication than either of us is comfortable with. But let's try. Relief flooded through Ethan so powerfully, it was almost painful. Yeah? Yeah. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that, watching fireflies write their temporary poetry on the darkening air. Inside, Lily slept on. The neighborhood settled into its evening rhythms. And two people who'd spent years protecting themselves from exactly this kind of risk sat together on a porch and chose to be brave. It wasn't a grand gesture, wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was just two damaged people deciding that maybe, possibly, healing was worth the vulnerability required to reach for it. After a while, Ethan carried Lily home, her head heavy on his shoulder, her breathing deep and even. Marissa walked them to the door, and they stood there awkwardly like teenagers after a first date. So, Marissa said. So, Ethan echoed. I'll see you tomorrow? Tomorrow's Sunday. Lily has soccer at 9, but after that we're free. Come over for lunch. I'll make something that isn't pasta. You don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. I want to see you, both of you. Is that okay? Ethan shifted Lily's weight, fighting the urge to kiss Marissa again right there on his porch. That's very okay. She smiled, and he could see the fear still there, but pushed back by something braver. Good. Noon? Noon. He got Lily into bed. She barely stirred, mumbling something about photos and lavender, and then stood in his bedroom window looking across at Marissa's house. A light was on in her studio. He could see her shadow moving, working on something. His phone buzzed, a text from her. Thank you for today, for all of it, for not giving up on me even when I was giving up on myself. He typed back, thank you for letting me in. That took more courage than anything I did. The response came after a pause. I'm still scared. Me too. Good night, Marissa. Good night, Ethan. He set down his phone and got ready for bed, mind already on tomorrow. On lunch at her place, on whatever came next, on the terrifying prospect of building something new from the ruins of what they'd both lost. Sleep came easier than it had in years. The next morning, Lily was full of questions over breakfast. Had Ms. Hale liked the photos they'd organized? Could they have dinner there again? Did he think Ms. Hale would teach her watercolors? Ethan answered patiently, amused by his daughter's transparent enthusiasm. After soccer, which Lily's team won, barely, they went home to shower and change. Lily insisted on wearing her favorite dress, the blue one with sunflowers. It's just lunch, Lil. I know, but Ms. Hale always looks nice. I should too. The observation made Ethan's heart squeeze. He hadn't realized Lily was paying that much attention, cataloging those details. Hadn't realized how much his daughter craved female presence in her life. They arrived at noon exactly, Lily carrying a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked from their yard. For the table, she explained. Marissa answered the door in jeans and a paint-stained shirt, hair tied back, and she looked beautiful in the way people do when they're comfortable in their own space. Her face lit up when she saw the flowers. "These are perfect," she said, accepting them from Lily. "I'll put them in water." Lunch was chicken salad and fresh bread, simple but good. They ate in the backyard this time, at a small table under a tree that desperately needed trimming. Lily chattered about soccer, about how her team needed better defense, about how Emma had scored the winning goal and then done a dance that got her a yellow card. After lunch, Marissa asked if Lily wanted to help her in the garden. Within minutes, they were both elbow deep in soil, transplanting seedlings Marissa had started indoors. Ethan watched from the porch, ostensibly reading a book, but mostly just observing them together. This was dangerous. This feeling of rightness, of pieces fitting together in a way that felt both inevitable and fragile. He'd spent 3 years avoiding exactly this, the possibility of caring enough to be hurt again. But watching Lily laugh at something Marissa said, seeing Marissa's careful walls continue to crumble, Ethan couldn't make himself regret the risk. His phone rang. His mother. He considered letting it go to voicemail, then sighed and answered. "Ethan, sweetheart, how are you?" "I'm good, Mom. At a friend's house." "A friend?" His mother's radar went up immediately. "What friend?" "Just a neighbor. Lily and I are helping with some yard work." "A female neighbor?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Yes, Mom, a female neighbor." "Well," he could hear the smile in her voice, "it's about time." "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying it's nice to hear you sounding happy. You haven't sounded happy in a very long time." The observation stung because it was true. "I'm managing, Mom." "Managing isn't living, honey. You know that." He watched Marissa show Lily how to test soil moisture, their heads bent close together. "I know." "So this neighbor, is it serious?" "It's new, very new, and complicated." "Life is complicated. That's not a reason to avoid it." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just stopped listening when you turned 13. She paused. "Bring her to dinner sometime. I'd like to meet her." "Mom." "Whenever you're ready. No pressure. But, Ethan, don't let fear make your decisions for you. You've done that long enough." After they hung up, Ethan sat with that advice, turning it over in his mind. Had he been letting fear decide? Absolutely. But was there a difference between healthy caution and paralyzing terror? "Dad," Lily called, "come see what we planted." He joined them in the garden, listening to Lily's excited explanation of companion planting and nitrogen fixation, concepts she'd apparently absorbed from her reading and Marissa's patient teaching. They'd planted tomatoes with basil, beans with corn, marigolds as a border to deter pests. "It's like a community," Lily explained. "Each plant helps the others. They're stronger together." Marissa met Ethan's eyes over Lily's head, and he saw the same thought reflected there. Stronger together. If only it were that simple with people. They spent the rest of the afternoon in comfortable domesticity. Marissa taught Lily the basics of watercolor while Ethan fixed a loose railing on her deck. Later, they all worked on sorting the rescued photos, creating piles by decade, by event, by the people in them. "This is my mom," Marissa said, holding up a photo of a woman with Marissa's eyes and a warm smile. "She died when I was 17. Cancer." "That's so sad," Lily said quietly. "It was, but I had Dad, and he made sure I knew she'd loved me. That helped." Marissa set down the photo carefully. "Losing people is terrible, but remembering them can be beautiful if you let it." Lily looked at Ethan. "Do you remember my mom? Really remember her?" The question caught him off guard. They didn't talk about this, had an unspoken agreement not to dig too deep into the wound. "Every day," he said honestly. "I remember how she laughed at terrible jokes, how she sang in the car even though she couldn't carry a tune, how she made the best chocolate chip cookies and burned everything else." He smiled at his daughter. "You have her laugh, you know, exactly the same." "I wish I remembered her better." Lily's voice was small. "You were 6, baby. It's okay not to remember everything." But what if I forget completely? Marissa reached over and squeezed Lily's hand. You won't. You've got pictures and stories and people who loved her to remind you. Memory isn't just what's in your head, it's in your heart too. The way you do things, the person you're becoming, she's part of that. Lily considered this, then nodded. Okay. The moment passed, but Ethan felt something shift. Some invisible barrier had come down, allowing harder truths to exist alongside the easier ones. They were building something here, not just a relationship between him and Marissa, but a new kind of family constellation. Incomplete, imperfect, but real. As evening approached, Ethan reluctantly announced they should head home. Tomorrow was Monday, back to work and school and regular life. Lily protested, but eventually gathered her things. At the door, Marissa touched Ethan's arm. Can I talk to you just for a minute? Lily skipped ahead to their house while Ethan stayed behind on Marissa's porch. Is everything okay? He asked. More than okay. She seemed nervous. I just wanted to say, this weekend, it meant something to me. You and Lily being here, helping with the basement, the photos, just being present. It's the most alive I've felt in 2 years. Marissa, let me finish. She took a breath. I'm still scared, still figuring out how to do this. But I don't want to stop. I don't want this to be just a weekend thing that fades back into polite waves across the street. I want... She trailed off. What do you want? Ethan asked gently. More, she said simply. Whatever that looks like. More time, more conversation, more of this feeling like maybe I'm not completely broken after all. Ethan stepped closer, taking her hands. You're not broken. You never were. I'm working on believing that, she smiled. Having you around helps. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise of more to come. When they pulled apart, he could see Lily watching from his porch, trying and failing to be subtle. Your daughter is spying on us. She's very invested in my social life. Ethan glanced back, waving at Lily, who ducked inside with exaggerated nonchalance. For the record, I want more too. Yeah? Yeah. Dinners, conversations, watching you teach my daughter things I never could. All of it. He squeezed her hands. We'll figure it out as we go. Slowly. As slow as you need. She walked him to the edge of her porch, and they stood there like teenagers drawing out a goodbye. I'll call you tomorrow, Ethan said. You better. He crossed the street to find Lily bursting with poorly contained excitement. You kissed her! We're adults. Adults sometimes kiss each other. Are you dating? Is she your girlfriend? Are you getting married? Whoa, slow down. Ethan held up his hands. We're seeing where things go. That's all. No big announcements, no huge changes, just seeing. Lily considered this with the seriousness of a judge. I like her. I know you do. She's sad sometimes, but she's nice sad, not scary sad. The observation was more perceptive than Ethan expected. What's the difference? Scary sad is when people push you away and don't want to talk. Nice sad is when people are sad but they still try. Lily looked up at him. You're nice sad too. Ethan pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her wisdom and her resilience and the weight of trying to be enough for her. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice. Fair enough? That night, after Lily was in bed, Ethan stood at his window again, looking across the street. Marissa's light was on. He pulled out his phone. Thank you for today, for being patient with me, with us. The response came quickly. Thank you for pushing me to let you in. I needed that. What are you working on? He texted. Deadline. Due Wednesday. A book about a girl who finds magic in her grandmother's garden. Sounds perfect for you. Feels perfect right now. Everything feels a little more possible today. Ethan smiled at his phone, feeling like a teenager but not caring. Dinner tomorrow? My place. I promise it'll be better than my usual Monday fare. A pause, then, I'd love that. He went to bed that night feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation for tomorrow. Not dread of getting through another day, not the weight of responsibilities and grief, but actual eagerness for what came next. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. And for the first time since Sarah died, Ethan Cole let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was life on the other side of loss. Not a replacement for what he'd had, but something new and valuable and worth the risk of reaching for. Across the street, Marissa Hale sat at her drafting table drawing magic gardens and feeling the same fragile hope, the same terrifying possibility. They were both still scared, still carrying their grief like permanent weight, still learning to trust that good things didn't always end in disaster, but they were learning together. And that made all the difference. Monday arrived with the kind of ordinary chaos that made Ethan grateful for routine. Lily couldn't find her math homework, the coffee maker decided to die mid-brew, and he was running 10 minutes late before he'd even gotten out the door. But underneath the familiar stress, there was something different, a lightness he hadn't felt in years, like walking through the world with slightly less weight on his shoulders. He dropped Lily at school and headed to work, mind already planning dinner. Nothing fancy. He wasn't trying to impress Marissa with culinary skills he didn't have, just something honest and home-cooked. Maybe the lemon chicken Sarah used to make, the one recipe he'd actually mastered. The thought of Sarah didn't sting the way it used to. Instead, it felt almost like permission. She'd want this for him, he realized. She'd want him to stop punishing himself with isolation, to give Lily something more than a father going through the motions of life. His phone buzzed during his lunch break. Marissa. Is 6:30 too early? I'm terrible at waiting for things I'm nervous about. He smiled, typing back, 6:30 is perfect. Fair warning, Lily will interrogate you about everything. She's very invested in knowing people. I like that about her. She's honest. Too honest sometimes. Last week she told the mailman his mustache looked like a caterpillar. Was she wrong? Not even a little bit. The workday crawled by with the particular slowness of time when you're anticipating something. Ethan caught himself checking the clock every 20 minutes, mentally reviewing his dinner timeline, wondering if he should set the table or if that was too formal, if wine was appropriate or presumptuous. He was overthinking everything, and he knew it, but couldn't seem to stop. At 3 p.m., he left work to pick up Lily from school. She climbed into the car full of energy, talking about a science experiment with vinegar and baking soda that had exploded everywhere and gotten Emma sent to the principal's office even though it was an accident. Ms. Hale's coming for dinner tonight, Ethan said when she paused for breath. Lily's eyes went wide. Really? Are you going to cook the fancy chicken? It's not fancy, it's fancy, Lily insisted. You only make it on special occasions. Oh, this isn't a special occasion, it's just dinner. His daughter gave him a look that suggested she saw right through that lie. Can I help cook? Sure. You can make the salad. They stopped at the grocery store, Lily insisting they needed flowers for the table and good bread, not the cheap kind. Ethan let her pick out a bouquet, amused by how seriously she took the task, examining each option like she was choosing the most important flowers in the world. At home, they worked together in the kitchen with the comfortable rhythm of practice. Lily washed lettuce and chopped vegetables with the careful precision of a child who'd been taught knife safety early and took it seriously. Ethan prepared the chicken, squeezing lemons and mincing garlic, trying not to think about the last time he'd made this dish. It had been for Sarah 2 weeks before she died. She'd been tired from work, stressed about a project deadline, and he'd wanted to do something nice. They'd eaten at the kitchen table while 6-year-old Lily colored in the living room, and Sarah had closed her eyes after the first bite and said, "This is perfect. You're perfect." He hadn't felt perfect then, didn't feel perfect now. But he was trying, and maybe that counted for something. "Dad?" Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. "You okay?" "Yeah, baby, just thinking. About Mom." He looked at his daughter, surprised by her perception. "A little. Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay." She went back to chopping cucumbers. "Ms. Hale says it's good to remember people, that forgetting them hurts more than missing them." She's right about that. They fell into comfortable silence, working side by side. The chicken went into the oven. The table got set. Lily's flowers arranged in a vase she'd found in the back of the cabinet, cloth napkins instead of paper because it's nicer. The house filled with the smell of roasting lemon and garlic. At 6:25, Lily stationed herself by the front window. "She's crossing the street!" Ethan's heart did something complicated. He wiped his hands on a towel, checked his reflection in the microwave door. Ridiculous, but he did it anyway, and tried to look calm and collected when he opened the door. Marissa stood on his porch holding a bottle of wine and looking nervous. She'd changed clothes from earlier, wearing a simple blue dress that made her eyes look darker, hair down and slightly damp like she'd just showered. The effort she'd put in made Ethan's chest tight. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He stepped aside. "Come in." She entered his house for the first time, and Ethan saw his familiar space through her eyes. It was clean, but lived in. Walls covered with Lily's artwork and school photos. A bookshelf overflowing with both adult novels and kids' books mixed together. The couch had a permanent dent from where he sat every evening. Sarah's piano sat in the corner, dusty but kept in tune, waiting for someone to play it again. Marissa's gaze landed on the piano and stayed there. "Sarah played," Ethan said quietly. "She was trying to teach Lily before. Do you play?" "No, but I can't get rid of it. Lily might want to learn someday." Marissa nodded, understanding written across her face. Some things you kept not because you used them, but because letting them go felt like betrayal. "Miss Hale!" Lily appeared from the kitchen, face flushed from cooking. "Smell that? We made Dad's fancy chicken, and I made salad with like 6 different vegetables." "It smells amazing," Marissa said, and her smile was genuine, warm. "I brought wine. Is that okay?" "Perfect." Ethan took the bottle, their fingers brushing in the exchange. That same electric awareness from before, but more settled now. Familiar. Dinner was easier than Ethan expected. They ate at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd shared thousands of meals with Sarah and Lily, and it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like the house breathing again, like life continuing instead of being preserved in amber. Lily dominated the conversation, telling Marissa about school and her friends, and the book she was reading about a girl who could talk to trees. Marissa listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention, not just humoring a child. "Do you think plants can hear us?" Lily asked, suddenly serious. "Like, really hear us?" "Emma says her mom talks to her tomatoes and they grow better." "I think there's actually science behind that," Marissa said. "Vibrations from sound waves can affect plant growth. But I also think plants respond to attention. When you talk to them, you're probably also watering them more carefully, checking their soil, noticing problems faster. So it's not magic, it's just paying attention." "Sometimes paying attention is its own kind of magic." Lily considered this, nodding slowly. "I like that." After dinner, Lily insisted on showing Marissa her room. Ethan started clearing the table, listening to their voices float down from upstairs. Lily's excited chatter, Marissa's quieter responses. The sound of his daughter connecting with someone, being herself without reservation, made something in his chest unknot. He was loading the dishwasher when Marissa came back down alone. "Where's Lily?" he asked. "Reading in bed. She said to tell you she's not tired, but her eyes were already closing when I left." Marissa leaned against the counter. "Your daughter is wonderful." "I know, I got lucky." "It's not luck, you're a good father. She feels safe enough to be completely herself. That's not an accident." The compliment hit harder than it should have. Ethan had spent 3 years second-guessing every parenting decision, wondering if he was enough, if he was doing it right, if Lily was okay or just good at pretending. "I'm winging it most of the time," he admitted, "just trying not to screw up too badly." That's all any parent does. The difference is you actually care whether you're screwing up. She moved closer, and he could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean. "Can I help with dishes?" "Absolutely not. You're a guest." "Ethan, I watched you cook an entire meal. Let me at least dry." They worked together in the kind of easy silence that usually took people months to develop. Ethan washed, Marissa dried, and put things away after asking where they belonged. It was domestic and comfortable and terrifying in how natural it felt. "This is nice," Marissa said eventually. "Being in someone else's space, seeing how they live, your house feels like a home." "As opposed to?" "Mine feels like a museum, everything preserved exactly as it was. Like, I'm afraid if I change anything, I'll lose what's left." She set down a plate carefully. "I've been thinking about that, about why I can't let go of his things, why I keep everything frozen." "And?" "I think it's because if the house changes, if I move on, then he's really gone. As long as everything stays the same, I can pretend he just stepped out for a while, that he'll come back and everything will go back to how it was. Ethan understood that better than he could say. He'd lived in that same delusion for months after Sarah died, keeping her things untouched, half expecting her to walk through the door and laugh at his terrible attempts at braiding Lily's hair. "When did you pack up her stuff?" Marissa asked quietly. "Sarah's things?" "About a year after. Lily asked why Mommy's clothes were still in the closet if she wasn't coming back. I didn't have a good answer." He scrubbed at a pan that was already clean. "I kept some things. Her wedding ring, a few shirts that still smelled like her, photos, obviously. But the rest, it was time." "Did it help, letting go?" "Yes and no. It made the house easier to live in, made it feel less like a shrine, but it also made everything final in a way I wasn't ready for." He met her eyes. "There's no right answer, Marissa. You do it when you're ready, or you don't do it at all. Both are okay." She nodded, blinking against tears. "I want to be ready. I want to move forward. I'm just scared of what that means." "What do you think it means?" "That I'm choosing to live in a world where he doesn't exist. That I'm okay with that. And I'm not sure I am." Ethan dried his hands and turned to face her fully. Moving forward doesn't mean being okay with loss. It means learning to carry it differently. Your dad existed. He mattered. Nothing you do changes that. "You're good at this," she said, voice thick. "At saying the right thing. I've had a lot of practice thinking about it." He reached up, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "You don't have to have all the answers tonight. You're allowed to take your time." She caught his hand, holding it against her face. "What if I never figure it out?" "Then you figure out how to live without having it figured out. There's no deadline on grief, Marissa. No expiration date on being sad about losing someone you loved." She turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss there that made his heart stutter. "Thank you." "For what?" "For understanding. For not trying to fix me or rush me or tell me I should be over it by now." "You're not broken," Ethan said again. "You're just healing. That's different." She pulled him closer, resting her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her and they stood like that in his kitchen, the dishwasher humming in the background, until her breathing steadied and the tension left her shoulders. "I should check on Lily," Ethan murmured eventually. "Okay?" But neither of them moved. Finally, reluctantly, Ethan stepped back. "Come on, I'll show you the living room. We can have coffee like civilized people instead of having emotional breakdowns in my kitchen." That got a laugh out of her, watery but genuine. "I think emotional breakdowns in kitchens are a sign of intimacy, actually. We've graduated from porch conversations." "Is that how it works?" "I'm making up the rules as I go." They settled on the couch with coffee, Ethan's, which was significantly better than Marissa's attempts. She curled into the corner, legs tucked under her, and looked around the room with open curiosity. "You have a lot of books?" she observed. Sarah was a reader. "So's Lily. I'm outnumbered." "What do you read?" "Lately, instruction manuals and parent advice blogs." He smiled. "Before Lily, I read mysteries, thrillers, stuff with clear problems and solutions." "Life's not like that, is it?" "Not even close." They talked for hours, the conversation wandering from books to childhood to dreams they'd given up on and ones they still carried. Marissa told him about wanting to illustrate graphic novels, about the stories she'd been working on for 3 years that she couldn't quite finish. Ethan told her about the house he and Sarah had planned to build, the one with a studio for her music and a workshop for him, the dream that died with her. "Do you still want it?" Marissa asked. "The house?" "I don't know. It was our dream, you know. Doing it without her feels wrong, but staying here forever feels like giving up." He stared into his coffee. "I keep waiting to know what I'm supposed to do, waiting for some sign that tells me which direction to go, but the signs never come." "Maybe there aren't signs. Maybe there's just what you decide to do next. That simple? That complicated?" She set down her mug. "Every morning I wake up and decide whether today is the day I pack up his flannel shirts. Most days the answer is no. But someday it'll be yes, and I won't know it's coming until it happens. That's all we can do. Make small decisions and hope they add up to something that looks like moving forward." Ethan reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "How'd you get so wise?" "Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy." She squeezed his hand. "You should try it. Having someone outside your life help you sort through the mess." I went for a while. After Sarah. The counselor kept wanting me to talk about my feelings, and I just wanted practical advice on how to help Lily. Maybe you need both. Maybe. He pulled her closer and she came willingly, tucking herself against his side. It felt natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. I'm glad you're here. Me too. She tilted her head up to look at him. This is terrifying, you know, letting myself care about you, about Lily, risking this. I know, I'm terrified too. But you're doing it anyway. So are you. She smiled, and in that smile, Ethan saw everything they were both risking, the possibility of loss, of pain, of grief compounded. But he also saw hope, fragile and determined, choosing to exist despite everything arguing against it. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she kissed him back like she was claiming something she'd been afraid to reach for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Marissa looked dazed. Wow, she said. Yeah. We should probably talk about this, about what we're doing, what it means, where it's going. We probably should, Ethan agreed, but maybe not tonight. Not tonight. They settled back into comfortable proximity, Marissa's head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Outside, the neighborhood settled into sleep. Inside, two people who'd been alone too long sat together and chose to be brave. Around 11, Marissa reluctantly announced she should go home. They stood at the door, drawing out the goodbye the way people do when they don't want the night to end. Tomorrow? Ethan asked. I have a deadline. I'll be working late. Wednesday, then. Dinner at your place? She smiled. It's a date. A date, he echoed, testing the word. We're dating. Apparently we are. She kissed him quickly. Good night, Ethan. Good night. He watched her cross the street, waiting until she was safely inside before closing his door. The house felt different now, less like a place he was hiding and more like a place he was living. The shift was subtle but significant. Upstairs, he checked on Lily. She was sprawled across her bed, book abandoned on the floor, sleeping the deep sleep of childhood. He pulled a blanket over her and kissed her forehead. Sweet dreams, baby girl, he whispered. The next 2 days passed in a blur of work and normalcy, punctuated by text messages that made Ethan smile at inappropriate times. Marissa sent photos of her work in progress, sketches of magical gardens and brave girls finding their way through impossible landscapes. He sent pictures of Lily's latest art project, a mixed media piece about ocean ecosystems that had taken over their dining table. Wednesday evening, Ethan and Lily crossed the street carrying a bottle of wine and a board game Lily insisted Marissa needed to learn. Dinner was indeed better than pasta. Marissa had made stir-fry, vegetables fresh from the garden they'd planted together, and it was slightly overcooked but made with obvious care. After dinner, they played the board game, which devolved into chaos when Lily kept making up rules that benefited her. Marissa laughed so hard she cried, and the sound of it, pure joy, unguarded, made Ethan's heart ache in the best way. Around 9, Lily fell asleep on the couch mid-game, curled up like a cat. Ethan covered her with a throw blanket while Marissa started cleaning up. She's welcome to stay, Marissa offered. I don't mind. You sure? I like having people here. It feels less empty. So Lily slept while Ethan and Marissa talked in low voices, careful not to wake her. They talked about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite foods, the small details that make up a life. And somewhere in the conversation, Marissa took his hand and said something that changed everything. I want to show you something. She led him upstairs to her father's bedroom, the one she never entered, the one he'd fixed the window in weeks ago. She stood in the doorway, hand tight around his. I haven't been in here since the day I found him, she said quietly. 2 years of walking past this door every day and not being able to go inside. You don't have to. I want to, I need to, but I need you with me. Ethan squeezed her hand. Okay. They entered together. The room was exactly as her father must have left it. Bed made with military precision, change on the dresser, reading glasses on the nightstand. Frozen in time, waiting for someone who would never return. Marissa stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. He was a good man, she said, stubborn and old-fashioned and terrible at showing emotion. But he loved me. He stayed sober for 15 years so he could be the father I deserved. He worked 2 jobs to send me to art school. He called every Sunday even when I was too busy to talk. Her voice broke. And I found him on that garage floor and I couldn't save him. I tried CPR like they taught us. I called 911. I did everything right, but it wasn't enough. Marissa. I've never said that out loud. Never told anyone that I tried to save him. Everyone just assumes I found him already gone. She turned to Ethan, face ravaged by grief. What if I'd come home earlier? What if I'd made him go to the doctor more often? What if— Stop, Ethan said gently but firmly. He pulled her into his arms. You can't what if yourself to death. You did everything you could. Heart attacks don't wait for convenient timing. They don't care how much you love someone or how desperately you want to save them. It's not fair, she sobbed into his shirt. None of it's fair. No, it's not. They stood there while she cried, really cried, the kind of grief that had been building for 2 years behind careful walls. Ethan just held her, offering presents instead of platitudes, understanding instead of solutions. Eventually, the tears slowed. Marissa pulled back, wiping her face. I'm sorry, I'm a mess. You're human. He tucked her hair behind her ear. And you just did something incredibly brave. She looked around the room, and something in her expression had shifted. I think I'm ready. Ready for what? To pack it up. Not everything. I want to keep some things. But the clothes, the everyday stuff, I want this to be a room again, not a shrine. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She managed a watery smile. Will you help me? Of course. Not tonight. I can't tonight. But soon? Whenever you're ready. They went back downstairs to find Lily still sleeping peacefully. When I fall apart. I'm not going when I fall apart. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan reminded her. How many times do I have to say it? Probably a few thousand more. I'm a slow learner. He kissed her forehead. I've got time. That weekend, true to her word, Marissa asked for help packing up her father's room. Ethan came alone this time. Lily was at a birthday party, giving them space for the harder work. They spent hours sorting through clothes, deciding what to keep and what to donate. Marissa kept his favorite flannel shirt, his watch, a jacket that still smelled like his cologne. The rest went into boxes. It was hard, painful work. Marissa cried multiple times. But there was something healing in it too, in making active choices about what to hold on to and what to release, in reclaiming the space for life instead of death. By the time they finished, the room was nearly empty, just the furniture and a few carefully chosen items. It looked sad and hopeful at the same time. What will you do with it? Ethan asked. I don't know yet. Maybe a guest room, maybe a studio. She looked around. Something living, something that breathes. They stood in the doorway, and Marissa leaned against Ethan's side. I couldn't have done this without you, she said. Yes, you could have. You just wouldn't have had to. She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that held less fear than before. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and perfect. Ethan's heart stuttered. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, feeling it, but not saying it, too scared of the weight those 3 words carried. You don't have to say it back, Marissa rushed on. I just needed to say it out loud, to stop being afraid of— I love you too, Ethan interrupted. She blinked. Really? Really, I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. What are we scared of? Losing it. Losing each other. Losing everything again. He cupped her face in his hands. But I'm more scared of not trying. She kissed him then, and it felt different from all the other kisses. It felt like a beginning instead of a possibility. Like they'd crossed some invisible threshold and there was no going back. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Marissa smiled. So now what? Now we keep going, Ethan said. One day at a time, together. Together, she echoed. And in that empty room that had held so much grief, 2 people who'd learned to survive alone decided they were ready to live together instead. Not merged into one person, not dependent or desperate. Just 2 whole people choosing to walk forward side by side, carrying their separate griefs and hopes and fears, but carrying them together. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't simple, but it was real, and that was enough. The words hung between them in the emptied room, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Marissa laughed, breathless, slightly hysterical, and pressed her face against Ethan's chest. "We just said we love each other while standing in my dead father's bedroom surrounded by donation boxes," she said. "That's incredibly morbid." "Or incredibly us," Ethan replied, and felt her shoulders shake with laughter. They stood there until the weight of the moment settled into something manageable, then went downstairs to load boxes into Ethan's truck. The charity thrift store was closing soon, and Marissa seemed determined to get everything out of the house before she could change her mind. They drove in comfortable silence, Marissa's hand resting on his knee, both of them processing what they'd just admitted to each other. Love. After everything they'd both been through, after all the walls and fear and careful distance, they'd said it out loud. At the thrift store, volunteers helped unload the boxes. Marissa watched them carry her father's clothes inside with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read, grief and relief tangled together. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I will be." She took his hand. "Can we go somewhere? I don't want to go home yet." They ended up at a small park on the edge of town, one of those forgotten places with old playground equipment and overgrown walking trails. The sun was starting to set, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. They sat on a bench overlooking a small pond where ducks circled lazily. Marissa leaned against him, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I've been thinking," she said after a while, "about what you said, about moving forward, not meaning you're okay with loss." "Yeah?" "I've spent 2 years trying to prove I'm fine, going through the motions, working, existing, but I wasn't fine. I was just really good at pretending." She watched the ducks paddle in slow circles. "When you showed up that day after the storm, when I asked for help for the first time in 2 years, something shifted. I remembered what it felt like to not carry everything alone." Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." "I know. That's what scares me." She turned to look at him. "What if I get used to this? To you being there, to having help, to feeling like maybe I can be happy again? What if I let myself depend on it and then what? I leave? I die? Something terrible happens and you're alone again?" He cupped her face gently. "Marissa, those things could happen. Life doesn't come with guarantees, but you can't live in fear of worst-case scenarios. I know that logically, but logic and feeling are different things. So we work on the feeling part, together." He traced his thumb across her cheekbone. "I'm scared too, you know. Scared of screwing this up, of hurting you, of Lily getting attached and then something going wrong. But I'm more scared of missing out on this because I was too afraid to try." She kissed him then, soft and searching, and when they pulled apart, she was smiling. "When did you get so brave?" "About 5 minutes after I met you and realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life watching from across the street." They stayed at the park until the sun set completely, talking about everything and nothing. About Marissa's upcoming deadline and Lily's school project. About whether they should tell people they were together or keep it quiet for a while. About simple, ordinary things that felt monumental because they were building a shared life one conversation at a time. On the drive back, Marissa's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted. "It's my mother," she said, voice going flat. "I should probably answer." Ethan had heard about Marissa's mother only in passing, a woman who'd remarried after her husband died, who lived in Arizona with her new family, who called occasionally but rarely visited. The tension in Marissa's voice told him everything he needed to know about that relationship. "Hey, Mom," Marissa said, putting the phone on speaker. "What's up?" "Marissa, finally. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days." The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient. "I need to talk to you about the house." "What about it?" "I've been thinking it's time you sold it. You've been rattling around in that old place for 2 years now. It's too much house for one person. The maintenance must be astronomical. And frankly, sweetie, I think it's keeping you stuck in the past." Ethan felt Marissa tense beside him. Her hand, which had been resting casually on his arm, tightened into a fist. "I'm not selling the house, Mom." "Don't be stubborn. I've already talked to a realtor friend of mine. She says the market is hot right now. You could get a great price, move somewhere smaller, maybe even move out here to Arizona. Start fresh." "I said I'm not selling." "Marissa, be reasonable. That house is full of memories that aren't healthy for you. Your father is gone. Keeping his house isn't going to bring him back. Marissa's jaw clenched. I know he's not coming back. I'm not an idiot. Then why are you clinging to that house, to that town? There's nothing there for you. Ethan watched Marissa's face cycle through emotions: anger, hurt, determination. He reached over and took her free hand, squeezing gently. She glanced at him and seemed to draw strength from the contact. Actually, Mom, there's a lot here for me. I have work, friends, a life I've built. This is my home. A life? Marissa, you barely leave the house. You work alone, you live alone, you've completely isolated yourself. That's not a life, that's existing. I'm not alone anymore, Marissa said quietly. There was a pause on the other end. What does that mean? It means I'm seeing someone. It means I have people who care about me. It means I'm actually happy for the first time in 2 years, and I'm not giving that up to move to Arizona and play nice with your new family. The words came out sharper than Marissa probably intended, but she didn't take them back. Ethan squeezed her hand again, proud of her for standing up, for claiming her life. You're seeing someone? Her mother's voice had shifted, become calculating. Who? How long has this been going on? That's not really your business, Mom. Of course it's my business. You're my daughter. I just want what's best for you. What's best for me is staying in my house, in my town, with the people I care about. Marissa's voice was steady now, certain. I'm not selling, Mom. This conversation is over. Marissa, don't be dramatic. I love you, but I'm hanging up now. I'll call you next week. She ended the call before her mother could respond, then sat very still, staring at her phone. That was my mother, she said unnecessarily. I gathered. She's been pushing me to sell since Dad died. Says I need to move on, start fresh, stop living in the past. Marissa set down the phone. She doesn't understand that this isn't about the past. This is my present, my future. You don't have to justify it to me, Ethan said gently. It's your house, your decision. She thinks I'm being stubborn and irrational. Are you? Marissa considered the question seriously. Maybe a little, but it's my right to be stubborn about my own life, isn't it? Absolutely. They pulled into Marissa's driveway, and she made no move to get out of the truck. Instead, she turned to face him fully. I meant what I said, about being happy, about having people who care. She reached up and touched his face. You've given me that, you and Lily. This feeling like maybe I can have a life that's more than just surviving. You've given us that too, Ethan said. More than you know. They sat in the truck until the automatic porch light kicked on, bathing them in its yellow glow. Finally, reluctantly, Marissa opened the door. I should let you get home. Lily's probably back from the party by now. Probably terrorizing the babysitter with sugar-fueled energy. Ethan climbed out and walked her to the door. You sure you're okay? After that call? I will be. It's not the first time she's pushed. Won't be the last. Marissa unlocked her door. Thank you for today, for helping with the room, for being there. Always. She kissed him goodnight, long and slow, then pulled back with a smile. I love you. I love you too. The words still felt new, exciting, terrifying. Ethan drove home with them echoing in his head, barely believing this was his life now. At home, he found Lily indeed hyped up on cake and excitement, telling the teenage babysitter about every detail of the party. After paying the sitter and ushering her out, Ethan braced himself for bedtime negotiations with a sugar-high 9-year-old. I don't need to sleep, Lily announced. I'm not even tired. You're going to crash hard in about 20 minutes. I'm not. She yawned hugely, contradicting herself. Ethan got her into pajamas and teeth brushed through sheer force of will, then tucked her into bed. She was asleep before he finished reading the first page of her bedtime story. He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her sleep, feeling the familiar ache of love mixed with fear. She was so small, so vulnerable, so dependent on him to make the right choices. And now he was bringing someone new into her life, someone she was already attached to, someone who could break her heart if things went wrong. But things could always go wrong. That was life. The question was whether the possibility of joy was worth the risk of pain. Looking at his sleeping daughter, Ethan decided it was. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. Marissa came over for dinner twice a week. They had a standing Sunday morning coffee date on Marissa's porch while Lily worked in the garden. Once, Marissa joined them for Lily's soccer game, and Ethan's heart did something complicated when he looked up from the sideline to see her cheering wildly for a goal. They were building something, not rushing, not forcing, just letting it develop naturally. And it felt right in a way Ethan had forgotten was possible. Then, 3 weeks after Marissa's mother had called, a car pulled up in front of her house. Ethan was in his yard raking leaves when he saw an older woman get out, late 50s, well-dressed, with Marissa's bone structure and none of her warmth. He watched the woman march up to Marissa's door and knock sharply. Watched Marissa answer, her face going from surprise to resignation. They disappeared inside and Ethan tried to go back to raking, tried to tell himself it wasn't his business, that Marissa could handle her own mother, that he shouldn't interfere. He lasted 15 minutes before crossing the street. Through the window, he could see them in the living room, the mother gesturing broadly, Marissa standing with her arms crossed defensively. Even without hearing the words, Ethan could read the tension in their body language. He knocked. Marissa answered, looking frazzled. "Ethan, hi. This isn't a great time. I can see that." He glanced past her at the woman watching them with sharp, assessing eyes. "Just wanted to make sure everything's okay." "Everything's fine. My mother just decided to drop by unannounced to continue our conversation about the house." "I decided no such thing," the mother said, moving closer. "I called 3 times yesterday. You didn't answer. So yes, I drove 8 hours to have this conversation in person because clearly you're not thinking straight." Ethan saw Marissa's jaw tighten. "Mom, this is Ethan, my neighbor. Ethan, this is my mother, Patricia." "The boyfriend," Patricia said, looking him up and down. "The reason my daughter has suddenly decided to throw away her future." "I'm not throwing away anything," Marissa said sharply. "You're wasting your life in this house, in this dead-end town. For what? A man you barely know and his child? Marissa, you're smarter than this." Ethan felt anger flash hot in his chest, but before he could respond, Marissa stepped forward. "Don't talk about them like that. Don't you dare. I'm trying to help you." "No, you're trying to control me, like you always do. You want me to sell the house because it makes you uncomfortable that I chose to keep Dad's memory alive. You want me to move to Arizona because it's easier for you if I'm close by and convenient. You want me to be alone because you can't stand that I've found something that makes me happy." Patricia's face flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Marissa's voice was rising, years of held-back frustration finally breaking free. "You left 6 months after Dad died, married Richard and moved across the country and started a whole new life, which is fine. You deserve to be happy. But you can't stand that I chose differently, that I chose to stay, to grieve, to build a life here on my own terms. I left because I couldn't bear to stay in that house without him. And I stayed because I couldn't bear to leave. We grieve differently, Mom. That doesn't make either of us wrong." The words hung in the air. Patricia looked shaken, some of her certainty cracking. "I just want you to be happy," she said, voice quieter now. "I am happy. For the first time in 2 years, I'm actually happy." Marissa gestured at Ethan. "Because of him. Because of his daughter. Because I finally let people in instead of pushing them away. That's my choice, and you need to respect it." Patricia looked between them, seeming to really see Ethan for the first time. "What are your intentions with my daughter?" The question was so old-fashioned, so formal, that Ethan almost laughed. But the woman's eyes were serious, genuinely concerned despite her controlling approach. "To love her," Ethan said simply. "To support her. To be there when she needs me and give her space when she doesn't. To help her heal while she helps me do the same." Something in Patricia's expression softened slightly. She looked at Marissa. "You love him?" "Yes." "And his daughter?" "Lily is amazing, smart and kind and brave. I love her too." Patricia sat down heavily on the couch, suddenly looking older and more tired. "I just don't want you to get hurt again. You were so broken after your father died. I couldn't reach you, couldn't help you. I thought if you moved away, started over, maybe you could escape all that pain." "You can't escape grief, Mom. You can only learn to carry it." Marissa sat beside her mother, voice gentler now. "I know you were trying to help in your own way, but this is my life, my choice, and I'm choosing to stay. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Patricia reached out and took Marissa's hand. The house is really important to you? It's home. It's where I feel close to Dad. It's where I'm building my life. Marissa glanced at Ethan. It's where I'm happy. Patricia nodded slowly. Then I'll stop pushing, but I reserve the right to worry about you. I can live with that. Ethan quietly excused himself, feeling like he'd witnessed something private and important. At the door, Marissa caught his hand and squeezed it, a silent thank you for standing with her. He crossed back to his own house, where Lily was building an elaborate fairy village in the backyard with sticks and leaves and intense concentration. Was that Ms. Hale's mom? She asked without looking up. How did you... I saw her pull up. She looks mean. She's not mean, just protective in a complicated way. Lily considered this, arranging acorns in a careful pattern. Are you and Miss Hale going to get married? The question hit Ethan like cold water. What? Where did that come from? You love each other. People who love each other get married. That's what Emma says. It's more complicated than that, Lil. Why? You're happy when she's around. She's happy when you're around. I'm happy when both of you are around. Seems simple to me. Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought. We've only been together a few weeks. Marriage that's a big step. But you've thought about it? He had. Late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he'd thought about what it would mean to really combine their lives. To wake up next to Marissa every morning, to make her officially part of their family. To give Lily the mother figure she'd been craving. But thinking about something and being ready for it were different things. I've thought about it, he admitted. But that's between me and Ms. Hale to figure out, okay? Lily shrugged, already back to her fairy village. Okay, but just so you know, I'd be fine with it, in case that matters. It matters, Ethan said quietly. More than you know. Later that evening, after Patricia had left and Lily was asleep, Ethan's phone rang. Marissa. Can I come over? She asked. I need to see you. Of course. She was at his door 5 minutes later, and he pulled her inside and into his arms. She clung to him, not crying but needing the contact. That was intense, she murmured against his chest. You were amazing, standing up to her like that. I've never done that before. Never told her no so directly. She pulled back to look at him. It felt good. Scary, but good. They settled on the couch, Marissa tucked against his side in the position that had become natural for them. She's staying at a hotel tonight, Marissa said. Coming back tomorrow to really talk without emotions getting in the way. Whatever that means. Say, do you want me there? No. This is something I need to handle myself. But knowing you're across the street helps. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. Finally, Marissa spoke again. Ethan, where's this going? Us, I mean. His heart picked up speed. Where do you want it to go? I don't know. Forward, I guess, but I don't know what forward looks like. She played with his fingers, not meeting his eyes. I've never done this before. The whole relationship thing. My longest relationship before you was Jake, and that barely lasted a year before it imploded. Sarah and I were together for 8 years before she died, Ethan said. And even with all that time, I don't think I had it figured out. Every relationship is different. You just make it up as you go. That's terrifying. Also freeing. We don't have to follow anyone else's timeline or expectations. We just do what feels right for us. Marissa finally looked at him. What feels right to you? Ethan thought about Lily's question earlier, about marriage and the future and all the big, scary possibilities. Honestly, everything with you feels right. Moving fast feels right. Taking it slow feels right. I just want to keep doing this, whatever this is, with you. Even though we're both still kind of a mess? Especially because we're both still kind of a mess. We understand each other's mess. She laughed, the sound washing away some of the day's tension. My therapist would love that we're bonding over shared trauma. Is that what we're doing? Among other things. She shifted to straddle his lap, and Ethan's breath caught. I love you. That still feels crazy to say out loud, but it's true. I love you, and I love Lily, and I love the life we're building together, even though it terrifies me. I love you too, Ethan said, hands settling on her waist. And I'm terrified too. So we'll be terrified together. She kissed him, and this time it wasn't gentle or careful. It was deep and wanting, months of restrained desire finally finding release. They made out on his couch like teenagers, careful to stay quiet, aware of Lily sleeping upstairs but unable to stop touching each other. Finally, breathless, Marissa pulled back. I should go home before this goes somewhere it shouldn't with your daughter in the house. Probably wise, Ethan agreed, though he made no move to let her go. Tomorrow, after I talk to my mom. Come over for dinner? Always. She kissed him once more, then reluctantly untangled herself and stood. At the door she turned back. Thank you for today, for standing up for me, for being there. That's what love is, Ethan said. Being there. The rest is just details. She smiled, and in that smile he saw their whole future, messy and uncertain, and absolutely worth fighting for. After she left, Ethan lay in bed thinking about marriage and commitment and all the ways love could break your heart or save it. He thought about Sarah and the life they'd planned that never happened. He thought about Marissa and the life they were building from broken pieces. And he thought about Lily's simple wisdom. You're happy when she's around? She's happy when you're around. Seems simple to me. Maybe it was that simple. Maybe all the fear and complication was just noise, and the truth was as straightforward as choosing happiness when it was offered. He fell asleep with that thought, and for the first time in 3 years dreamed about the future instead of the past. The next morning arrived with autumn sunshine and the smell of coffee brewing too early. Ethan stood at his kitchen window, watching Marissa's house, wondering how the conversation with her mother was going. Patricia's rental car was still parked in the driveway. She'd arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, armed with what looked like a briefcase full of real estate documents. Ethan had watched them disappear inside an hour ago, and hadn't seen movement since. Is Ms. Hale okay? Lily asked through a mouthful of cereal. She's fine, just having an important talk with her mom. About the house? Yeah. Lily considered this, swinging her legs under the table. Her mom doesn't understand that homes aren't just buildings. They're where your memories live. Sometimes his daughter's wisdom caught him completely off guard. That's exactly right, Lil. So Ms. Hale should keep it, even if it's hard sometimes. Because the hard stuff is part of the memories too. Ethan turned from the window to look at his daughter, really look at her. When had she gotten so perceptive, so emotionally intelligent? He'd been so focused on keeping her safe, on being both parents, that he'd somehow missed her growing into this remarkable person. You're pretty smart, you know that? She grinned. I get it from you. You get it from your mom, Ethan corrected gently. She always knew the right thing to say. I wish I remembered her better. The admission came out small, vulnerable. Sometimes I try really hard to remember her voice, and I can't. Is that bad? Ethan crossed to the table and knelt beside her chair. It's not bad. It's just how memory works. But you know what? You've got her kindness, her way of seeing right to the heart of things, her terrible jokes. He smiled. Those parts of her are alive in you. That's better than just remembering. Lily threw her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. I love you, Dad. I love you too, baby girl. They stayed like that for a moment, and Ethan felt the familiar ache of being one person trying to be enough for a child who deserved the world. But underneath the ache was something new, the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to do this alone anymore. His phone buzzed. Marissa, can you come over? I need you. Ethan's heart jumped. Lily, grab your book. We're going across the street. Is everything okay? I don't know yet. They crossed the lawn together, Lily clutching her current favorite novel about dragons and found families. Marissa answered the door looking exhausted but steady. Patricia sat on the couch surrounded by papers, her earlier certainty replaced by something softer. Ethan, Patricia said, standing. And this must be Lily. Lily looked at the older woman with open curiosity. You're Ms. Hale's mom. You look like her. Do I? Patricia seemed surprised by the observation, pleased even. Thank you. I suppose I do. Can I show you my fairy village? Lily asked Marissa, apparently deciding the adults needed space. I finished it yesterday and it has a whole government system. Marissa's face lit up despite her obvious tiredness. Absolutely. Let's see this masterpiece. They disappeared into the backyard, leaving Ethan alone with Patricia. The silence stretched awkward and heavy. She's a lovely girl, Patricia said finally. Your daughter. Thank you. She's my whole world. I can see that. Patricia gestured to the papers on the couch. Marissa and I have been talking, really talking, for the first time in a long time. About her father, about grief, about what she needs versus what I think she needs. She paused. I was wrong. About the house, about her life here. I was projecting my own fear onto her. Ethan wasn't sure what to say to that, so he just nodded. I lost my husband, Patricia continued, and the only way I could survive was to run. New place, new life, new everything. I couldn't understand why Marissa would choose to stay in the same house where she found him, surrounded by all those memories. It seemed like torture. She looked out the window where Marissa and Lily were crouched over the fairy village, Marissa listening intently to Lily's animated explanation. But watching her with you, with your daughter, I see something I missed before. She's not stuck. She's rooted. There's a difference. There is, Ethan agreed quietly. Patricia turned to face him fully. Are you serious about my daughter? This isn't just some rebound relationship for a lonely widower? The question should have offended him, but Patricia's eyes held genuine concern rather than accusation. I'm completely serious, Ethan said. I love her. I love who I am when I'm with her, who my daughter is when she's around. This isn't about filling a void or replacing what I lost. It's about building something new. And if it doesn't work out, if this relationship ends badly, then we'll both hurt, and we'll both heal, and we'll make sure Lily doesn't get caught in the middle. He met Patricia's gaze steadily. But I don't plan on it ending badly. I plan on being there for as long as she'll have me. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? I'm trusting you with my daughter's heart. Don't make me regret it. I won't. They stood there in surprisingly comfortable silence until Marissa and Lily came back inside, both covered in bits of grass and dirt. The fairy village has a democratic electoral system, Marissa announced, and a surprisingly complex economy based on acorn trading. It's very advanced, Lily added seriously. Patricia laughed, a genuine, warm sound that transformed her face. You always did have a gift for getting lost in imaginary worlds, Marissa, even as a child. Something passed between mother and daughter then, a recognition of shared history and separate grief, of wounds still healing but no longer festering. I should get going, Patricia said, gathering her papers. I have a long drive back. You could stay another day, Marissa offered, and the offer sounded genuine. We could have dinner, talk more. I'd like that, Patricia smiled. But Richard is expecting me, and I've already rescheduled our anniversary dinner twice. Rain check? Rain check. At the door, Patricia hugged her daughter, not the brief obligatory embrace from before, but a real hug that spoke of connection being rebuilt. I'm sorry, Patricia whispered, for not understanding, for pushing when I should have been listening. I'm sorry too, Marissa replied, for shutting you out, for not trying to explain. They pulled apart, both blinking back tears. Patricia turned to Lily. Take care of my daughter, okay? Make sure she doesn't work too hard and remembers to eat actual meals. I can do that, Lily said solemnly. I'm very responsible. I can see that. Patricia looked at Ethan last. And you? Don't mess this up. I'll do my best. After Patricia left, they all stood on the porch watching the rental car disappear down Maple Ridge Drive. Marissa let out a long breath. Well, that happened. Are you okay? Ethan asked. I think so. Better than okay, actually. She looked at him with eyes that held less fear than he'd ever seen there. She gave me her blessing. Not that I needed it, but it matters. Having her understand. What did you tell her about us? The truth. That you make me happy. That I'm in love with you. That I can see a future here that includes both of you. She glanced at Lily. If that's okay with everyone involved. Lily's face split into a huge grin. It's very okay. They spent the rest of the day together, the three of them, doing nothing particularly special. They weeded Marissa's garden and found a family of toads living under a stone, which Lily declared the best discovery ever. They made sandwiches for lunch and ate them sitting on a blanket in the backyard. They sorted through more of the rescued photos, Marissa telling stories about her childhood while Lily listened with rapt attention. It was ordinary and perfect, the kind of day that didn't make dramatic stories but made up a life worth living. That evening, after dinner and dishes and Lily's bath, Ethan read her a bedtime story while Marissa sat in the doorway listening. When Lily finally drifted off, they tiptoed downstairs together. "Stay," Ethan said quietly. "Just for a while longer." They settled on the porch with wine, watching fireflies emerge as darkness fell. The neighborhood was quiet, settled into its evening rhythms. Across the street, Marissa's house stood with its lights on, no longer dark and closed off. "I've been thinking," Marissa said after a while. "About?" "The future. What it looks like. What I want it to look like." Ethan's heart picked up speed. "And what do you want?" She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw fear and hope in equal measure. "I want this. You, me, Lily. I want more mornings waking up and knowing you're across the street. I want more dinners together. I want to watch Lily grow up and teach her to draw and help her with homework and be there for all the small moments that add up to a life." "Marissa, I'm not saying we need to rush anything," she continued quickly. "I'm not asking for marriage or moving in together or any big dramatic gestures. I'm just saying I want the future we're building. I want to choose it actively instead of just stumbling into it." Ethan took her hands. "I want that too. All of it. And you're right, we don't need to rush. We can take it one day at a time." "But you're thinking about it, the big stuff." "Every day," he admitted. "I think about what it would be like to wake up next to you every morning, to make this official, to give Lily the family she deserves." He paused. "But I also think about taking our time, making sure we get it right, building a foundation that can handle whatever comes." "So we're on the same page. We're reading the same book." She laughed, then kissed him soft and sweet. "I love you. I love you too." They sat together until the mosquitoes drove them inside, talking about small things and big dreams, making plans and leaving room for uncertainty. It wasn't perfect. They were both still carrying grief, still learning how to be whole people who chose to be together rather than broken people who needed each other to function. But it was real, and real was enough. Over the next few months, their lives continued to knit together in small, significant ways. Marissa started joining them for Sunday morning pancakes, which became a tradition. Ethan helped Marissa convert her father's bedroom into a studio space, the room finally breathing with life instead of death. Lily began taking art lessons from Marissa twice a week, her skills improving dramatically under careful guidance. They navigated the awkward questions from neighbors who'd noticed them spending time together. They dealt with Lily's friend Emma asking pointed questions about whether Ms. Hale was Lily's new mom. They figured out how to exist as a unit while still maintaining separate lives and identities. It wasn't always smooth. There were arguments about small things, whose turn it was to pick up Lily from school, whether Marissa should join them for Thanksgiving with Ethan's family, how much time they should spend together versus apart. There were moments when old grief surged up unexpectedly, when the weight of loss felt too heavy to carry even with help. But they worked through it. They talked instead of shutting down. They asked for space when they needed it and showed up when it mattered. They learned each other's rhythms and respected each other's boundaries. And slowly, carefully, they built something that felt permanent. 6 months after that first storm, on a Saturday morning in early spring, Ethan found himself standing in Marissa's backyard watching Lily teach her about companion planting techniques she'd learned from a book. The garden had transformed from overgrown mess to thriving ecosystem, vegetables and flowers growing in careful harmony. Marissa caught his eye and smiled, and Ethan felt the now familiar warmth of being exactly where he was supposed to be. Later, after Lily had gone to play at Emma's house, Ethan helped Marissa stake tomato plants. They worked in comfortable silence until Marissa spoke. "I need to tell you something." The serious tone made Ethan's stomach clench. "Okay." "I got an offer. A big publishing house in New York wants me to illustrate a trilogy. It's a huge opportunity, the kind of work I've been hoping for since art school." Pride and fear warred in Ethan's chest. "That's amazing. You should take it." It would mean traveling to New York several times for meetings, longer deadlines, more intense work periods. She set down her gardening tools. "But they're okay with me working remotely. I don't have to move." Relief flooded through him. You're staying? Of course I'm staying. My life is here. You're here. Lily's here. This is home. She moved closer. But I wanted you to know that I chose this. Not because I'm scared to leave or stuck in the past, but because this is where I want to be. Ethan pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed by gratitude and love. I'm so proud of you. Yeah? Yeah. You're doing the thing you've always dreamed of, and you're doing it on your own terms. That's incredible. They stood there among the tomato plants and emerging vegetables, two people who'd learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending it didn't hurt. It was about choosing to build a future anyway, despite the fear, despite the risk. That evening, with Lily back home and sprawled on the couch reading, Ethan made a decision. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his mother. Can you watch Lily next weekend? I need to take Marissa somewhere. The response came quickly. Of course. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. I'll explain later. He spent the next week planning, enlisting Lily's help with surprising enthusiasm. She approved of the location, the same park where he and Marissa had talked after packing up her father's room. She helped pick out flowers from the garden to bring. She promised to keep the secret, even though she was terrible at secrets and might explode from the pressure. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Ethan dropped Lily at his mother's house. She hugged him tight and whispered, "Good luck," with the seriousness of someone entrusted with important knowledge. He picked up Marissa at noon, telling her only that they were going somewhere special. "You're being mysterious," she observed. "I'm being romantic. There's a difference." "Are you, Ethan Cole, are you doing a romantic gesture?" "Don't sound so surprised. I'm capable of romance." "I never said you weren't. I'm just enjoying this side of you." They drove to the park, and Marissa laughed when she recognized it. "We're going to our bench?" "It's become our bench, hasn't it?" They walked to the spot overlooking the pond where ducks still paddled in lazy circles. Ethan had come earlier to set up a blanket, a picnic basket, the flowers Lily had helped arrange. "Ethan, this is beautiful." "It's not much, just somewhere quiet where we can talk." They sat down, and Ethan unpacked lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and fruit, and the terrible wine Marissa claimed to love, even though they both knew it was objectively bad. They ate and talked about nothing important, enjoying the sunshine and each other's company. Finally, when the food was gone and they were lying on the blanket watching clouds drift by, Ethan spoke. "Do you remember what you said here 6 months ago?" "I said a lot of things. You'll have to be more specific." "You said you wanted the future we're building, that you wanted to choose it actively." Marissa propped herself up on one elbow, looking at him with sudden intensity. "I remember. I've been thinking about that. About choosing our future instead of just letting it happen." He sat up, heart pounding, palms sweating despite the cool breeze. "And I've decided I want to choose you, every day, for the rest of my life." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Nothing expensive or elaborate, just a simple ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Marissa's eyes went wide. "Ethan, let me finish." He opened the box. "I know it's fast. I know we're both still figuring things out. I know there are probably 100 practical reasons why we should wait longer. But, Marissa, I've spent 3 years being careful and cautious and safe, and the only thing it got me was lonely. Being with you, loving you, building this life together, that's the first time I've felt truly alive since Sarah died." Tears were streaming down Marissa's face now. "I'm not asking you to replace her. I'm not asking you to be Lily's mother or to give up any part of yourself. I'm just asking if you want to make this official, to choose each other intentionally, to build a future together instead of just hoping it works out." He took a shaky breath. "Marissa Hale, will you marry me?" She stared at him, at the ring, at him again. For a terrifying moment, Ethan thought she might say no, that he'd moved too fast, pushed too hard, scared her away. Then she launched herself at him, kissing him hard enough that they both fell backward onto the blanket. "Yes," she said between kisses. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Relief and joy crashed through him in equal waves. He pulled back just enough to see her face. "Yeah? Are you kidding? Ethan, I've been thinking about this for months. I was just too scared to bring it up." She was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I want to marry you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to be there for Lily. I want all of it." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her. They lay there on the blanket, holding each other, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd just promised. "Lily knows, doesn't she?" Marissa asked eventually. "She helped plan this. She's very invested in our relationship. That kid is too smart for her own good. She gets that from you." Marissa laughed. "I've known her 6 months and she's already picking up my traits? That's terrifying." "That's family." The word hung between them. Family. Not replacement or substitute, but something new built from old pieces. A constellation of people choosing each other despite and because of their broken edges. They stayed at the park until sunset, making plans and laughing at how surreal it all felt. They talked about whether to have a small ceremony or just go to the courthouse, about whether Marissa would move into Ethan's house or they'd find somewhere new together, about how to tell Lily, even though she already knew. When they finally got back to the neighborhood, Ethan's mother's car was already in his driveway. Lily burst out the front door before they could even park. "Did she say yes? Please tell me she said yes, because I've been keeping this secret for a whole week and I'm about to combust." Marissa laughed, holding up her hand to show the ring. "I said yes." Lily screamed and launched herself at both of them, and they caught her in a group hug that felt like the most natural thing in the world. Ethan's mother appeared on the porch, smiling. "Congratulations, you two." "Thanks, Mom." "About time, honestly. I was starting to think I'd have to intervene." They all went inside together, and Lily insisted on calling everyone she knew to share the news. Ethan and Marissa let her, watching with amusement as she breathlessly explained to Emma that yes, Ms. Hale was going to be her family now, and yes, that meant she could take art lessons whenever she wanted. Later, after Ethan's mother had left and Lily was finally asleep, too excited to settle for hours, Ethan and Marissa stood in his backyard looking at the stars. "Are you scared?" Marissa asked quietly. "Terrified." "Me too." "Good. I'd be worried if we weren't." He pulled her closer. "But I'm more excited than scared. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything." They stood there in the dark. Two people who'd learned that love didn't erase grief but could exist alongside it. That moving forward didn't mean forgetting what came before. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone in despite every reason to keep them out. The weeks that followed were a blur of planning and adjustment. They decided on a small ceremony in Marissa's backyard. The garden they'd rebuilt together seemed like the right place to start their marriage. Just close family and a few friends. Nothing elaborate, just honest and real. Marissa moved into Ethan's house slowly, bringing her things over bit by bit, until one day they realized she hadn't slept at her own place in 2 weeks. They kept her house, though, converted it into her full-time studio where she could work without interruption, a space that was entirely hers. Lily adjusted with surprising ease, claiming she'd known this would happen eventually, with the confidence of someone who absolutely hadn't known, but was pretending she had. She started calling Marissa by her first name instead of Ms. Hale, which felt like progress. There were hard moments, too. The first time Marissa had to discipline Lily and felt like she was overstepping. The night Ethan woke from a nightmare about Sarah and Marissa didn't know how to help. The argument about whether to keep Sarah's wedding photos displayed or put them away. But they navigated each challenge by talking it through, by giving each other grace, by remembering that building a family from broken pieces took time and patience. The wedding itself was perfect in its imperfection. It rained the morning of the ceremony, forcing them to move everything under a hastily erected tent. Lily's flower girl dress got torn when she climbed a tree to rescue a bird's nest. The minister forgot his reading glasses and had to improvise half the ceremony. But when Ethan stood at the makeshift altar watching Marissa walk toward him through the garden they'd created together, none of the small disasters mattered. She was beautiful in a simple dress, hair loose, carrying wildflowers Lily had picked that morning. They exchanged vows that they'd written themselves, promises to love each other through grief and joy, to be patient with healing, to build a life that honored where they'd been while choosing where they were going. When the minister pronounced them married, Lily cheered louder than anyone. The reception was casual, barbecue and music and dancing in the garden. Ethan's mother spent the whole time crying happy tears. Patricia had flown in from Arizona and actually got along with Ethan's family, the two mothers bonding over shared relief that their children had found each other. As the sun set and guests started leaving, Ethan found himself standing with Marissa and Lily, watching fireflies begin their evening dance. "We did it," Marissa said softly. "We did. Now what?" Ethan looked at his daughter, their daughter now, and his wife, and felt a contentment he hadn't known was possible. "Now we live. We build. We keep showing up for each other. We figure it out as we go." "That's simple." "That's simple." Lily tugged on both their hands. "Can we dance? Just us three?" They moved to the makeshift dance floor as a slow song started playing. Lily stood on Ethan's feet while Marissa wrapped her arms around both of them, and they swayed together under strings of lights and emerging stars. This was family, Ethan thought. Not perfect or painless, not without complications or grief, but real and chosen and worth every risk they'd taken to get here. Months turned into years. The house across the street became Marissa's thriving studio, where she illustrated books that won awards and touched hearts. Lily grew into a teenager who split her time between soccer and art, carrying pieces of all the women who'd shaped her. Sarah's kindness, Marissa's creativity, her own fierce independence. Ethan and Marissa learned to navigate marriage with the same careful attention they'd brought to dating. They fought and made up. They supported each other's dreams and held each other through nightmares. They built a life that honored their past while embracing their present. Some nights, Ethan still stood at the window looking across at the house where it all began. But now when he looked, he saw light spilling from every window, saw the garden thriving, saw evidence of a life fully lived instead of merely survived. Marissa would come up behind him on those nights, wrapping her arms around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she'd ask. "How lucky we are." Luck had nothing to do with it. We chose this. And she was right. They'd chosen each other despite every reason not to, chosen hope over fear, chosen to build something new from broken pieces. Sometimes healing didn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it just walked across the street with a toolbox and decided to stay. Sometimes it started with a desperate request for help and grew into something neither person expected but both desperately needed. The house no longer felt closed off. It breathed with life and laughter and the beautiful mess of people learning to love again. The neighborhood kids played in both yards now, not seeing them as separate properties but as one extended home. And on quiet evenings, when the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun set over Maple Ridge Drive, Ethan understood something he hadn't known in the dark years after Sarah died. Love didn't replace what you'd lost. It didn't erase grief or make the past disappear, but it could coexist with loss. It could grow in the spaces between heartache and healing. It could be both tribute to what was gone and celebration of what remained. Marissa reached over and took his hand, and Lily leaned against both of them, and they sat together in the gathering dark, three people who'd found each other across storms and grief and fear, who'd chosen to be brave enough to try. The house across the street glowed with warmth, the gardens bloomed with life, and somewhere in the space between what was lost and what was found, a family had grown from the simple courage to ask for help and the grace to accept it when it was offered. Sometimes that was all it took. One person brave enough to reach out, another brave enough to reach back, and the willingness to build something beautiful from the fragments. The storms would come again. They always did. But now they'd face them together, knowing that healing wasn't about avoiding the rain, but learning to dance in it. And in that knowledge, in that choice, they found something neither had expected, but both had desperately needed. They found home.